is not wretched. It's the greatest land in the world. Veerbhadra playfully put his hands together in a mock apologue. Secondly, continued Nandi, we dance only when an occasion demands it, like the Holi festival or a public performance. But the greatest joy derived from dancing is when you do it for no reason at all, Captain, said Veerbhadra. I agree, said Shiva. Nandi immediately fell silent without any warning. Veerbhadra suddenly burst forth into one of the folk songs of his region. Shiva smiled at his friend, for Veerbhadra was singing one of his favorites. Continuing to sing, Veerbhadra rose slowly and began dancing to the lilting tune, now accompanied by Shiva. The combination of marijuana and dance immediately changed his mood. Prahaspati stared at Shiva, first in shock and then with pleasure. He noticed a pattern in their dancing, a smooth six-step combination that was repeated rhythmically. Shiva reached out and pulled Prahaspati and Nandi to their feet. They joined in, tentative at first, but it was only a matter of time before a reluctant Prahaspati was dancing with abandon. The group moved together in a circle around the fire, the singing louder and livelier. Shiva suddenly darted out of the ring towards Sati. Dance with me. A flabbergasted Sati shook her head. Oh, come on. If you can dance while you're Gurvi and I watch, then why not here? That was in pursuit of knowledge, said Sati. So? Must all dance be solely towards that end? I didn't say that. Fine. Have it your way, said Shiva with a frustrated gesture. Ayavati, come. A startled Ayavati didn't know how to react. Before she could decide on a course of action, Shiva held her hand and pulled her into the circle. Veerbhadra lured Klitika in as well. The group danced boisterously and sang loudly, making a racket in an otherwise quiet night. Sati got up agitatedly and glared at Shiva's back before running into the rest house. Shiva's anger increased even more as he noticed her absence when he tumbled towards the veranda den. He returned to his dance, his heart in a strange mixture of pain and joy. He tumbled once again towards the veranda. There was nobody. Who's behind that curtain? Shiva was dragged into the next move by Veerbhadra. It was some time later that he was in a position to look once again at the veranda. He could see Sati, outlined behind the curtain, staring at him, only at him. Wow! Surprised and delighted, Shiva swung back into his dance, moving in his prime form. He had to impress her. Chapter 13 Blessings of the Impure. Kotwa was decked up in all its glory to receive the Neelkanth. Torches had been lit across the fort perimeter as if it was Diwali. Red and blue pennants, embellished with the Suryavanshi sun, had been hung down the fort walls. In a rare breach of protocol, the governor had come outside the city to personally receive the Neelkanth. The following day, a public function had been organized after the Neelkanth had met the Kotwa elite at the local court. 65,000 people, practically the entire population of Kotwa, had converged for the event. Keeping in mind the vast number of attendees, the event had been organized outside the city platform to ensure that every person could be accommodated. A speech delivered by Shiva convinced the Kotwarons that Meluha's days of trouble were soon to end. The remarkable effect Shiva seemed to have on the people was a revelation to him. Though he was careful with his words, telling them that he would do all he could to support the people of Meluha, the public made their own interpretations. The cursed Chandravanshis will finally be destroyed, said one man. We don't have to worry about anything now. The Neelkanth will take care of everything, said a woman. Seated with Prahaspati and Sati on the speaker's platform, Parvateshwar was deeply unhappy with the public's reaction. Turning to the chief scientist, he said, our entire society is based on the rule of law and we are not meant to blindly follow anyone. We are expected to solve our problems ourselves and not hope for miracles from a solitary man. What has this man done to deserve such blind faith? Parvateshwar, said Prahaspati politely, for he greatly respected him. I think Shiva is a good man. I think he cares enough to want to do something. And aren't good intentions the first step towards any good deed? Parvati's didn't completely agree. Never a believer in the legend of the Nilkanth, the general thought that every man or woman had to aim his station in life with training and preparation, and not just receive it on a silver platter because of a blue throat. Yes, that may be true. But intentions aren't enough. They have to be backed by ability as well. Here we are, putting an untrained man on a pedestal and acting as though he is our savior. For all we know, he might lead us to complete disaster. We are acting on faith, not reason or laws or even experience. Sometimes one needs a little bit of faith when faced with a difficult situation. Reason doesn't always work. We may also need a miracle. You're talking about miracles. A scientist. You can have scientific miracles too. Parvati smiled. Parvati was distracted by the sight of Shiva stepping off the platform. As he came down, there was a surge of people wanting to touch his hand. The soldiers, led by Nandi and Veerbhadra, were holding them back. There was a blind man amongst them who looked like he might get injured in the melee. Nandi, let that man through, said Shiva. Nandi and Veerbhadra lowered the rope to let him in. Another man shouted, I am his son. He needs me to guide him. Let him in as well, said Shiva. The son rushed in and held his father's hand. The blind man, who seemed lost without his son's hand, smiled warmly as he recognized the familiar touch. He was led close to Shiva and the son said, Father, the Nilkanth is right in front of you. Can you sense his presence? Copious tears flowed from the blind man's eyes. Without thinking, he bent down to try and touch Shiva's feet. His son cried out in shock as he pulled the man back sharply. Father, scolded the son. Shiva was stunned by the harshness in the son's tone, which was in sharp contrast with the loving manner in which he had spoken so far. That happened. I am sorry, my lord, apologized the son. He didn't mean to. He just forgot himself in your presence. I am sorry, my lord, said the blind man, his tears flowing stronger. What about? Asked Shiva. He is a Vaikama, my lord, said his son, ever since disease blinded him 20 years ago. He should not have tried to touch you. Sati, who now standing near Shiva, had heard the entire conversation. She felt sympathy for the blind man. She knew the torment of having even your touch considered impure. But what he had tried to do was illegal. I am sorry, my lord, continued the blind man. But please don't let your anger with me stop you from protecting our country. It is the greatest land that Paramatma created. Save it from the evil Chandra /Ranches_ save us, my lord. The blind man continued to cry while folding his hands in a penitent namaste. Shiva was shaken by the dignity of the blind man. He still loves a country that treats him so, and why? Evo, Worsby doesn't appear to think he's being treated unfair. Tears welled up in Shiva's eyes as he realized that he was LCH3 king at a man whom fate had been very unkind to. I will stop this nonsense. Shiva stepped forward and bent down. The flabbergasted son trembled in disbelief as he saw the Nilkanth touch the feet of his Vaikama father. The blind man was at sea for a moment. When he did understand what the Nilkanth had done, his hand shot up to cover his mouth in shock. Shiva rose and stood in front of the blind man. Bless me, sir, so that I find the strength to fight for a man as patriotic as you. The blind man stood dumbstruck, his tears dried up in his bewilderment. He was about to collapse when Shiva took a quick step forward to hold him, lest he fall to the ground. The blind man found the strength to say, 6J0 but. I'll be victorious. The son caught hold of his father's limp body as Shiva released him. The entire crowd was stunned into silence by what the Nilkanth had done. Forget the gravity of touching a Vaikama, the Nilkanth had just asked to be blessed by one. Shulpatum to see Parvati's enraged face. Shiva had broken the law. Broken it brazenly and in public. Next to him stood Sati. Her face, her eyes, her entire demeanor expressionless. What the hell is she thinking? Brahaspati and Sati entered Shiva's chambers as soon as he was alone. Shiva's smile at seeing Evo of his favorite people in the world disappeared on hearing Sati's voice. You must get a Shuddhikaran done. He looked at her and answered simply, no no. What do you mean no? I mean no. Nahin_Nako said Shiva, adding the words for no in the Kashmiri and the Kotwa dialect, for good measure. Shiva said Brahaspati, keeping his composure. This is no laughing matter. I agree with Sati. The governor too was worried about your safety and has arranged for a pandit. He waits outside as we speak. Get the ceremony done now. But I just said I don't want to. Shiva said Sati, reverting to her usual tone. I respect you immensely. Your valor. Your intelligence. Your talent, but you are not above the law. You have touched a Vaikarma_ you have to get a Shuddhikaran_ that is the law. Well, if the law says that my touching that poor blind man is illegal, then the law is wrong. Sati was stunned into silence by Shiva's attitude. Shiva, listen to me, argued Brahaspati _ doing a Shuddhikaran Kanaya harmful to you. You are meant for bigger things. You are important to the future of India. Don't put your own person at risk out of obstinacy. Is not obstinacy, you tell me, honestly. How can it harm me if I happen to touch a wronged man, who I might add, still loves his country despite the way he has been ostracized and ill-treated? He may be a GCH3D man, Shiva, but the sins of his previous birth will contaminate your fate, said Brahaspati_ then let them. If the weight on that man's shoulders lessens, I will feel blessed. What are you saying, Shilpa? Asked Sati. Why should you carry the punishment of someone else's sins? Firstly, I don't believe the nonsense that he was punished for the sins of his previous birth. He was just stricken by an illness, plain and simple. Secondly, if I choose to carry the weight of someone else's so-called sins, why should it matter to anyone? It matters because we care about you, cried Brahaspati. Come on, Sati, said Shiva. Don't tell me you believe in this rubbish. It is not rubbish. Look, don't you want me to fight for you? Stop this unfamous that your society has subjected you to. Is that what this is about? Me? Asked Sati, outraged. No, retorted Shiva immediately, then added. Actually yes, this is also about you. It is about the Vaikarma and the unfairness that they have to face. I want to save them from leading the life of an outcast. One don't need your protection. One cannot be saved, shouted Sati, before storming out of the room. Shiva glared at her retreating form with irritation. What the hell is it with this woman? She's right, Shiva advised Brahaspati_ don't go there. You agree with her on this Vaikarma business? Answer from your heart, Brahaspati_ don't you think it is unfair? I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about Sati. Shiva continued to glare at Brahaspati defiantly. Everything in his mind, body and soul told him that he should pursue Sati. That his life would be meaningless without her. That his soul's existence would be incomplete without her. Don't go there, my friend, reiterated Brahaspati_ The caravan left the river city of Kotwa on a royal barge led and followed by two large boats of equal size and grandeur as the royal vessel. Typical of the Meluhan security system, the additional boats were to confuse any attacker as to which boat the royal family may on. The entire royal party was in the second boat. Each of the three large boats was manned by a brigade of soldiers. Additionally, 5 small and quick cutter boats kept pace on both sides of the royal convoy, protecting the sides in case of an ambush. The rivers are the best way to travel when the monsoon is not active, my lord, said Ayutvati_ though we have good roads connecting all major cities, they cannot match the rivers in terms of speed and safety. Shiva smiled at Ayutvati politely. He was not in the frame of mind for much conversation. Sati had not spoken to Shiva since that fateful day at Kotwa when he had refused to undergo a Shuddhikaran. The royal barge stopped at many cities along the river. The routine seemed much the same. Extreme exuberance would manifest itself in each city on the arrival of the Nilkanth. It was a kind of reaction that was quite unnatural in Meluha. But then, a Nilkanth didn't grace the land every day. Why? Asked Shiva of Brihaspati, after many days of keeping quiet about the disquiet in his troubled heart. Why what? You know what I am talking about, Brihaspati said Shiva, narrowing his eyes in irritation. She genuinely believes that she deserves to be a Vaikama, answered Brihaspati with a sad smile. Why? Perhaps because of the manner in which she became a Vaikama. How did it happen? It happened during her earlier marriage. What? Sati was married? Yes. That was around 90 years ago. It was a political marriage with one of the noble families of the empire. Her husband's name was. She got pregnant and went to Mecca to deliver the child. It was the monsoon season. Unfortunately, the child was stillborn. Oh my God, said Shiva, empathizing with the pain Sati must have felt. But it was worse. On the same day, her husband, who had gone to the Narmada to pray for the safe birth of their child, accidentally drowned. On that cursed day, her life was destroyed. Shiva stared at Brihaspati, too stunned to react. She became a widow and was declared a Vaikama on the same day. But how can the husband's death be considered her fault, argued Shiva. That's completely ridiculous. She wasn't declared a Vaikama because of her husband's death. It was because she gave birth to a stillborn child. But that could be due to any reason. The local doctors could have made a mistake. That doesn't happen in Meluha, Shiva said. Brihaspati calmly. Giving birth to a stillborn child is probably one of the worst ways in which a woman can become a Vaikama. Only giving birth to a Naga child would be considered worse. Thank God that didn't happen. Because then she would have been completely ostracized from society. This has to be changed. The concept of Vaikama is unfair. Brihaspati looked at his friend intensely. You might save the Vaikama, Shiva. But how do you save a woman who doesn't want to be saved? She genuinely believes that she deserves this punishment. Why? I'm sure she is not the first Meluhan woman to give birth to a stillborn. There must have been others before her. And there will be many more after her. She was the first royal woman to give birth to a stillborn. Her fate has been a source of embarrassment to the emperor. It raises questions about his ancestry. How would it raise questions about his lineage? Sati is not his birth daughter. She and Wandi also have come from Mecca, right? No, my friend. That law was relaxed for families of nobility around 150 years back. Apparently in the national interest, noble families were allowed to keep their birth children. Some laws can be amended, provided 90% of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas above a particular chosen tribe and Ayab status vote for the change. There have been rare instances of such unanimity. This was one of them. Only one man opposed this change. Who? Lord Satyajit, the grandfather of Parvates. Their family vowed not to have any birth children after this law was passed. Parvates honors that promise to this day. But if the birth law could be changed, said Shiva, working things out, why couldn't the law of Vaikama? Because there aren't enough noble families affected by that law. That is the harsh truth. But all this goes completely against Lord Ram's teachings. Lord Ram's teachings also say that the concept of the Vaikama is correct. Don't you want to question that? Shiva glanced at Brihaspati silently, before looking out at the river. There is nothing wrong with questioning Lord Ram's laws, my friend, said Brihaspati. There were times when he himself acknowledged a higher rationale. The issue is per motive for wanting to change the law. Is it cause you genuinely think that the law itself is unfair? Or is it because you are attracted to Sati and you want to remove an inconvenient law which stands in your path? I genuinely think the Vaikama law is unfair. I have felt it from the moment I found out about it. Even before I knew Sati was a Vaikama _ but Sati doesn't think that the law is unfair. She is a good at 7 man _ she doesn't deserve to be treated this way. She is not just a good woman. She is one of the finest I have ever met. She is honest, straightforward, brave and intelligent, everything a man could possibly want in a woman. But you are not lust another man. You are the Neelkanth _ Shiva turned around and rested his hands on the craft's railing. He looked into the distance at the dense forest along the riverbanks as their boat glided over the water. The soothing evening breeze fanned Shiva's long locks. I've told you before, my friend said Brahaspati _ because of that unfortunate blue throat, every decision you take has many ramifications. You have to think many times for you. It was late in the night. The royal fleet had just set sail from the city of Satyenga on the Indus. The emotions at Satyenga had erupted in the now predictable routine of exuberance at the sight of the Neelkanth. The savior of their civilization had finally arrived. Their savior, however, was in his own private hell. Sati had maintained her distance from Shiva for the last few weeks. His pain was deep, his loneliness constant. The fleet's next port of call was the famous Mohenjo Dam, or the platform of Moham. The city, on the mighty Indus, was dedicated to a great philosopher priest called Lord Mohan, who had lived in this region many thousands of years ago. Once he had met with the people of Mohenjo-Dato, Shiva expressed a desire to visit the temple of Lord Mohan. This temple stood further downstream outside the main city platform. The governor of Mohenjo-Daro had offered to accompany the Lord Neelkanth there in a grand procession. Shiva, however, insisted on going alone. He felt drawn to the temple. He felt that it would offer some solutions to his troubled heart. The temple itself was simple. Much like Lord Mohan himself, a small nondescript structure announced itself as the birthplace of the sage. The only sign of the temple's significance was the massive gates in the 4 cardinal directions of the compound. As instructed by Shiva, Nandi and Veerbhadra, alongside their platoon, waited outside. Shiva, with his comforting cravat back around his neck, walked up the steps feeling tranquil after a long time. He rang the bell at the entrance and sat down against a pillar with his eyes shut in quiet contemplation. Suddenly, an oddly familiar voice asked, "How are you, my friend?" Chapter 14 Pandit of Mohenjo-Daro. Shiva opened his eyes only to behold a man who seemed almost a replica of the Pandit he had met at the Brahma temple, in what seemed like another life. He sported a similar long flowing white beard and a big white mane. He, a saffron dhoti and angvastram _ the wizened face, wore a calm and welcoming smile. If it hadn't been for this Pandit's much taller frame, Shiva could have easily mistaken him for the one he had met at the Brahma temple _ How are you, my friend? Repeated the Pandit as he sat down. I am all right, Pandavi, said Shiva, using the Indian term ji as a form of respect. He couldn't understand why, but the intrusion was welcome to him. It almost seemed as though he was drawn to this temple because he was destined to meet the Pandit. Do all Pandits in Meluha look alike? The man smiled warmly. Not all the Pandits _ just us. And who might us be, Panditji? The next time you meet one of us, we will tell you, said the Pandit cryptically. That is a promise. Why not now? At this point of time, our identity is not important, smiled the Pandit. What is important is that you are disturbed about something. Do you want to talk about it? Shiva took a deep breath. Gut instinct told him that he could trust this man. There is this task that I supposedly have to do for Meluha _ I know. Though I wouldn't dismiss the Neelkantha's role as a task _ he does much more than that. Pointing at Shiva's throat, the Pandit continued, a strip of cotton cloth cannot cover divine brilliance. Shiva looked up with a wry smile. Well, Meluha Dtrs seem like a wonderful society. And I want to do all I can to protect it from evil. Then what is the problem? It is that I find some grossly unfair practices in this nearly perfect society. And that this is inconsistent with the ideals that Meluha aspires to. What practices are you referring to? Asked the Pandit _ for example, the way the Vaikama are treated. Why is it unfair? How can anyone be sure that these people committed sins in their previous birth? And that their present sufferings are a result of that? It might be sheer bad luck. Or a random act of nature. You're right. It could be. But do you think that the fate of the Vaikama is about them personally? Isn't it? No, it isn't, explained the Pandit. It is about the society as a whole. The Vaikama acceptance of their fate is integral to the stability of Meluha. Shiva frowned. What any successful society needs, O Neelkanth, is flexibility with stability. Why would you need flexibility? Because every single person has different dreams and capabilities. The birth son of a warrior could have the talent to be a great businessman. Then society needs to be flexible enough to allow this son to change his vocation from his father's profession. Flexibility in a society allows change, so that all its members have the space to discover their true selves and grow to their potential. And if every person in a society achieves his true potential, society as a whole also achieves its true potential. I agree. But what does this has to do with the yukam? I'll come to the obvious question in a bit, just bear with me, said the Pandit _ if we believe that flexibility is key to a successful society, then the maker system is designed to achieve it in practice. No child knows what the professions of his birth parents are. He is independent to pursue what his natural talent inspires him to do. I agree. The maker system is almost breathtakingly fair. A person can credit or blame himself for what he does with his life. Nobody else. But this is about flexibility. What about stability? Stability allows a person the freedom of choice, my friend. People can pursue their dreams only when they are living in a society where survival is not a daily threat. In a society without security and stability, there are no intellectuals or businessmen or artists or geniuses. Man is constantly in fight or flight mode. Nothing better than an animal. Where is the luxury then to allow ideas to be nurtured or dreams to be pursued? That is the way all humans were before we formed societies. Civilization is very fragile. All it takes is a few decades of chaos for us to forget humanity and turn into animals. Our base natures can take over very fast. We can forget that we are sentient beings, with laws and codes and ethics. I understand. The tribes in my homeland were no better than animals. They didn't even want to live a better life. They didn't know a better life was possible. Neelkanth _ that is the curse of constant strife. It makes us forget the most beautiful aspects of being human. That is why society must remain stable, so that it is not pushed into a situation of having to fight for survival. All right. But why would allowing people to achieve their potential cause instability? In fact, it should make people happier with their lives and thereby make society increasingly stable. True, but only partially. People are happy when their life changes for the better. But there are two situations in which change can lead to chaos. First, when people face a change imposed by others, in situations that they cannot understand. This scares them almost as much as the fear of death. When change happens too fast, they resist it. Yes, change forced by others is difficult to accept. And too rapid a change causes instability. That is the bedrock of Lord Ram's way of life. There are laws which help a society change slowly and allow it to remain stable. At the same time, it allows its citizens the freedom to follow their dreams. He created an ideal balance between stability and flexibility. You mentioned a second situation. The second is when people cannot make the transition they want in order to improve their lives for reasons beyond their control. Say there is an exceptional warrior who loses his hand-eye coordination due to a disease. He is still a fighter, but not extraordinary anymore. The odds are that he will be frustrated about what he perceives as injustice meted out to him. He is likely to blame his doctor, or even SCNET at large. Many such discontented people can become a threat to society as a whole. Shiva frowned. He didn't like the logic. But he also knew that one of the main reasons why the Pacantis had rejected the peace offer made by his uncle years ago was because the ill-diseased and old chief was desperate to live up to his earlier reputation of being an exceptional warrior who could have defeated the Gunners. Their combined rage can lead to unrest, even violence, said the Pandit. Lord Ram sensed that. And that is why the concept of Vaikarma came into being. If you make a person believe that his misfortune in this birth is due to his sins in his previous birth, he will resign himself to his fate and not vent his fury on society at large. But I disagree that ostracizing the Vaikarma can work. It would only lead to a progressive increase in pent-up anger. But they are not ostracized. Their living expenses are subsidized by the government. They can still interact with family members. They are free to achieve personal excellence in their chosen fields. Wherever possible, they can also fight to protect themselves. They cannot, however, be in a position to influence others. And this system has worked for 1000 years. Do you know how common rebellion was in India before Indram created this empire? And most of the times, the rebellions were not led by far-sighted men who thought they would create a better way of life for the common man. They were led by men discontented with their lot in life. People who were a lot like the Vaikarma. These rebellions usually caused chaos and decades were lost before order was restored. So what you are saying is that anyone who is frustrated with life should simply resign himself to being a Vaikarma, said Shiva. Why? For the larger good of society. Shiva was aghast. He could not believe what he was hearing. He deeply disliked the arguments being presented to him. I am sorry, but I think this system is completely unfair. I have heard that almost 1/20th of the people in Meluha are Vaikarma. Are you going to keep so many people as outcast forever? This system needs to change. You can change it. You are the Neelkanth. But remember, no system is absolutely perfect. In Lord Ram's time, a lady called Manthara triggered a series of events which led to the loss of millions of lives. She had suffered terribly due to her physical deformities. And then, fate put her in a position of influence over a powerful queen and thus over the entire kingdom. Therefore, the karma of one maladjusted victim of fate led to the mass destruction that followed. Would it not have been better for everybody if this person had been declared a Vaikarma? There are no easy answers. Having said that, maybe you are right. Maybe there are so many Vaikarma now that it can lead to a tipping point, tumble society into chaos. Do I have the solution to this problem? No. Maybe you could find it. Shiva turned his face away. He believed in his heart that the Vaikarma system was unfair. Are you concerned about all the Vaikarma, O Neelkanth? Asked the Pandit. Or just one in particular? What is the Lord doing in there? Asked Nandi. He is taking too long. I don't know, said Veerbhadra. All I know is that if Shiva says he needs to do something, I accept it. Why do you call the Lord by his name? Because that is his name. Nandi smiled at the simple answer and turned to look at the temple. Tell me, Captain, said Veerbhadra, coming close to Nandi. Is Kritika spoken for? Spoken for? I mean, continued Veerbhadra. Is she off limits? Off limits? You know what I mean, said Veerbhadra, turning beet red. She is a widow, said Nandi. Her husband died 15 years back. Oh, that's terrible. Yes, it is, said Nandi, as he smiled at Veerbhadra. But to answer your question, she is not spoken for right now. My lady, may I say something? Asked Kritika. Sati turned from the guest room window to look at Klitilka with a surprised frown. Have I ever stopped you from speaking your mind? A true Sarivanshal always speaks her mind. Well said Kritika _ sometimes, it may not be so bad to lose control. Sati frowned even more. Kritika spoke quickly, before her courage deserted her. Forget about him being the Nilkanth, my lady. Just as a man, I think he is the finest I have seen. He is intelligent and brave, funny and kind, and worships the ground you walk on. Is that really so bad? Sati glared at Kritika. She didn't know if she was more upset with Kritika for what she was saying or with herself for experiencing feelings which were apparently so evident. Kritika continued, maybe, just maybe, breaking the rules can lead to happiness. I am a Sarivanshi, said Sati, her voice dropping. Rules are all that I live by. What have I got to do with happiness? Don't ever dare to speak to me about this again. Ksata 49. Yes, there is this particular Vaikarma, admitted Shiva. But that is not why I think the Vaikarma law is unfair. I know that, said the Pandit _ but I also know that what troubles you right now is your relationship with that one in particular. You don't want her to think that you would change the law, however justified you feel in doing so, just to get her. Because if Sati believes that, she will never come to you. How do you know her name? Asked Shiva, flabbergasted. We know many things, my friend. My entire life is meaningless without her. I know, smiled the Pandit. Perhaps I can help you. Shiva frowned. This was unexpected. You want her to reciprocate your love. But how can she when you don't even understand? I think I understand her. I love her. Yes, you do love her. But you don't understand her. You don't know what she wants. Shiva kept quiet. He knew the Pandit was right. He was thoroughly confused about Sati. You can hazard a guess at what she wants, continued the Pandit, with the help of the theory of transactions. What? Asked a flummoxed Shiva. It makes up the fabric of society. Excuse me, but what does this have to do with Sati? Indulge me for a while, Nilkanth, said the Pandit. You are aware that the cloth which has been spun into your clothes is created when cotton threads are woven together, right? Yes, answered Shiva. Similarly, transactions are threads that when woven together make up a society, its culture. Or in the case of a person, they weave together his character. Shiva nodded. If you want to know the strength of a cloth, you inspect the quality of its weave. If you want to understand a person's character, look closely at his interpersonal behavior or his transactions. All right, said Shiva slowly, absorbing the Pandit's words. But transactions are ____. I'll explain, interrupted the Pandit. Transactions are interactions between two individuals. It could be trading goods, like a Shudra farmer offering grain for money from a Vaishya. But it could also be beyond material concerns, like a Kshatriya offering protection to a society in return for power. Shiva nodded in agreement. Transactions are about give and take. Exactly. According to this logic, if you want something from someone, you have to give that person something he wants. So what do you think she wants? Asked Shiva. Try and understand Sati's transactions. What do you think she wants? I don't know. She is very confusing. No, she isn't. There is a pattern. Think she is probably the most eminent Vaikarma in history. She has the power to rebel if she wants to. She certainly has the spirit, since she never backs off from a fight. But she does not rebel against the Tikama law. Neither does she fade into the background like most Vilkamas and live her life in anonymity. She follows the commandments, and yet, she does not whine and complain. However unfairly life treats her, she conducts herself with dignity. Why? Because she is a righteous person. That she is, no doubt, but that is not the reason. Remember, a transaction, you give thing because you want something in return. She is accepting an unfair law without some trying to make anyone feel guilty about it, and most importantly, She continues to use her talents to contribute to the good of society whenever she can. What do you think a person who is giving all this in her transactions with society wants in return? Respect, answered Shiva. Exactly. I rammed the pandit underscore, and what do you think you do when you try to protect such a person? Disrespect her. Absolutely. I know it comes naturally to you to want to protect any good person who appears to be in need. But control that feeling where Sati is concerned, respect her. And she will feel irresistibly drawn you. She gets many things from the people who love her. What she doesn't get is what she craves for the most, respect. 3. Shiva looked at the pandit with a grateful smile. He had found his answer, respect. After 2 weeks, the Nilkanthas convoy reached the city of Karakapar at the confluence of the Indus and the Western Sea. It was a glittering city which had long grown beyond the one platform that it had been built on. The Dvitiya, or second platform, had been erected 50 years ago on an even grander scale than the first one. The Dvitiya platform was where the Karakapar elite lived. The governor, a diminutive Vaishya called Juleshwar, had heard of and followed the new tradition of receiving the Nilkanth outside the city. Karakapar, with its 100,000 citizens, was at its heart a frontier trading city. Therefore it was an act of foresight by Lord Brahmanayak, Emperor Daksha's father, to have appointed a Vaishya as its governor over 100 years ago. Juleshwar had ruled the city extraordinarily well, gilding its fate in gold. He was considered its wisest and most efficient governor ever. Karakapar had long overtaken Lothal in the eastern part of the empire to become Meluha's premier city of commerce. While foreigners such as Mesopotamians and Egyptians were allowed into this liberal city, they couldn't travel further inland without express royal permission. Juleshwar escorted the Nilkanth on an excursion to the Western Sea on his very first day in Karakapar. Shiva had never seen the sea and was fascinated by the near infinite expanse of. He spent many hours at the port where Juleshwar proudly expounded upon the various types of ships and vessels that were manufactured at the shipyard attached to the Karakapar port. Brahaspati accompanied them to the port in order to check on the imports he was expecting from the Mesopotamian merchants. At the state dinner organized for Shiva, Juleshwar proudly announced that a yajna, a ceremonial fire sacrifice, was being organized the next day in honor of the Nilkanth, under the auspices of Lord Varun and the legendary Ashwini Kumar twins. The Ashwini Kumar twins were celebrated ancient seafarers who had navigated ocean routes from Meluha to Mesopotamia and beyond. Their maps, guidance and stories were a source of inspiration and learning for this city of seamen. After dinner, Shiva visited the chambers where Sati and Kritika were housed. I was wondering, said Shiva, still careful with Sati since she had gone back to being formal with him, will you be coming to the yajna tomorrow? I am very sorry, Lord Nilkanth, said Sati courteously. But it may not be possible for me to attend the ceremony. I am not allowed to attend such yajnas. Shiva was about to say that nobody do 1D question her since she would be attending with Nilkanth _ but he thought better of it. Perhaps we could practice some dance tomorrow. I cannot remember the last time we had a dance session. That would be nice. I have not had the benefit of your instruction in a long time, said Sati. Shiva nodded unhappily at Sati. The freeze in their relationship tormented him. Bidding goodbye, he turned to leave. Kritika glanced at Sati, shaking her head imperceptibly. Chapter 15 Trial by Fire. The little boy humid through a dusty goat trail, trying to avoid the sharp stones, bundling into his fur coat the dense, wet forest ink mashed upon path menacingly. It was difficult to see beyond the trees lining the narrow path. The boy was sure that there were monsters lurking be, the dense foliage, waiting to pounce on him if be not down. His village was but a few hours or Eurovi. There was rapidly setting behind the mountains. Moat closed the darkness. He had bid his mother and grandmother Vitedo when be was being difficult. He would horse liked being accompanied by an elder, as monsters didn't mubble the elders. His heart skipped a beat as he heard a strange heaving sound. He immediately odmv out his sword, suspecting an attack from behind. His friends had heard many stories about the monsters of the forests. The cowards never attacked from the front. He stood still, straining to determine the direction of the sound. It had a peculiar repetitive rhythm and seemed vague familiar. He felt as though he had heard it before. The beat BG was now accompanied by a heavy grunting male voice. This was not a monster. The boy felt excitement course through his body. He harbored this whisper and about it, but had never seen the act himself. This was his chance. He crept slowly into and foliage, his sword dangling his side. Did not have to go too far when he came upon the source of the sound. It came from a snail clear G. He hid behind a TZETMMK and peeped. It was a couple. They seemed to be in a humi. They had not even disembed completed. The man was extraordinarily hairy, almost like a bear. And Boyko Aldo see his back this angle. He had a frontal view of woman bow. SBE was beautiful. Her wavy hair was long and lustrous. The part-torn blouse emiled a fim, breast, with deep red welts upon them OU.IPG the brutal intercourse. Her skiff had been ripped apart and reused exquisite long legs. The boy was excited beyond imagination. Wait till his best fiend Badra heard of this. As he evoed the show, his disquiet grew. Something seemed amiss. The man was in the times of passion while the woman lay passive, almost dead, her bandy SIK lifeless, her side her no war fight shut. She was not encouragements to her low, were bost SARS of X*_Y royal G down her cheeks. Oh, was she being forced? But bo could that be? The man's knife 141, within the woman's reach. She could have picked up the blade and stabbed him if she wanted. The boy shook his bead. He tried to silence his Kausaiu. Yurt, shut up. Let me look. And then came the moment that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The woman's eyes suddenly fell upon him. Help, out, please help. The startled boy fell back, ducked his sword. The hairy monster turned to see who the woman was calling. The boy quick picked up his sword and fled, ignoring the searing pain on his frostbit foot as he ran. He was terrified though of the map, chasing him. He could bear the man's heavy breathing. The boy leapt onto the goat trail and sped towards his village. He could still hear the heavy breathing. I was drawing closer every second. The boy sudden swerved to bis 199. Pit-oted and slashed back with his. There was nobody there. No sound of heavy breathing. The only sound was the haunting plea of a distraught "You, oh ma'am, please be for." The little boy looked back. That poor woman. Go back. Help her, cried his inner voice. He hesitated for a moment. Then fumed and fled towards his village. No. Go back, help her. Shiva woke up sweating, his heart pounding madly. He instinctively turned around, wanting desperately to go back to that dreadful day. To redeem himself. But there would be no redemption. The woman's terrified face came flooding back. He shut his eyes. But how do you shut your eyes to an image that is branded on your mind? He pulled his knees up and rested his head upon them. Then he did the only thing that helped. He cried. Xata 4 at the Yugna platform had been set up at the central square of the Dwaitya platform. For Karakapa, it was not the usual austere affair that was typical of Meluha. The frontier city had decorated the venue bright colors that vied for attention. The platform itself had been painted in a bright golden hue. Colorfully decorated poles, festooned with flowers, held aloft a shamiana, a cloth canopy. Red and blue pennants, with the Surivanshi symbol painted on them, hung proudly from many poles. The entire atmosphere was that of pomp and show. Jules Hua received Shiva at the head of the platform and guided him to his ritual seat at the yajna. At the governor's repeated requests, Shiva had removed his cravat for the duration of the ceremony. Patviteshwar and Brahaspati sat to the right of the Neelkanth while Jules Hua and Ayan, Kati sat to his left. Nandi and Veerbhadra had also been invited to sit behind Shiva. Though this was unorthodox, Jules Hua had acceded to the Neelkantha's request. Jules Hua governed a cosmopolitan border city and believed that many of the strict Meluhan laws could be bent slightly for the sake of expediency. His liberal attitude had made Karakarpa a magnet for people from a wide variety of races and a hub for the exchange of goods, services and ideas. Shiva looked towards Sati's balcony, which overlooked the central square in the distance. Though Sati was not allowed to step onto the platform while the yajna was being conducted, she could look on at the proceedings from the safe distance of her chambers. Shiva noticed her standing behind the balcony curtain, with Kritika by her side, observing the proceedings as was the custom before such a yajna. The Pandit stood up and asked formally, "If anybody here has any objection to this yajna, please speak now. Or forever hold your peace." This was just a traditional question, which wasn't actually supposed to be answered. Hence there was an audible, collective groan when a voice cried out loudly, "I object." Nobody needed to look to recognize where the voice came from. It was Tank, an immigrant from the ultra-conservative northwest regions of the empire. Ever since Tarak had come to Karakarpa, he had taken it upon himself to be the moral police of this decadent city of sin. Shiva strained his neck to see who had obliqued lawns. He saw Tarak standing at the back, at the edge of the puja platform, very close to Sati's balcony. He was a giant of a man with an immense stomach, a miner's bulging muscular arms and a fair face that was cut up brutally due to a lifetime of strife. He cut an awesome figure. It was obvious, without even looking at his amulets, that Tarak was a kshatriya who had made his living working in the lower rungs of the army. Jules Hua glared at Tarak in exasperation. "What is it now? This time we have ensured that we have not used the white Chandravanshi colors in our decorations. Or do you think the water being used for the ceremony is not at the correct temperature prescribed by the Vedas?" The gathering sniggered. Patviteshwar looked at JHCH31ishwar sharply. Before he could reprimand the governor for his cavalier reference to the Vedas, Tarak spoke up. "The law says no tikama should be allowed on the yajna platform." "Yes," said Jules Hua _ and unless you have been declared a Vaikama, I don't think that law is being broken." "Yes it is." There were shocked murmurs from the congregation. JHCH31ishwar raised his hand. "Nobody is a Vaikama here," Tarak said. Jules Hua _ "Now please sit down. Princess Sati defiles the yajna with her presence." Shiva and Parvateshwar looked sharply at Tarak _ Jules Hua was as stunned as the rest of the assembly by Tarak's statement. "Tarak," said, "you go too far. Princess Sati is confined to the guest house, abiding by the laws of the yajna. She is not present on the Ragra platform. Now sit down before I have you whipped." "On what charge will you have me whipped, Governor?" yelled Tarak, standing up. "For the law is not a crime in Meluha _ but the law has not been broken." "Yes it has. The exact words of the law is that no Vaikama can be on the same platform while a yajna is being conducted. The yajna is being conducted on the Dvaitya platform of the city. By being on the same platform, the princess defiles the yajna." Tarak was technically correct. Most people interpreted that law to mean that a Vaikama could not ire on the proa ceremony platform. However, since Karakarpa, like most Meluhan cities, was built on a platform, a strict interpretation of the law would mean that Sati should not ire anywhere on the entire Dvaitya platform. To keep the yajna legal, she would either have to move to the other platform of the city or outside the city walls. Jules Hua was momentarily taken aback as Tank's objection was accurate in principle. He tried a weak rally. Come Tarak _ you are being too conscientious. I think that is too strict an interpretation." "I think no," Shri Julswai reverberated a loud voice through the gathering. Everybody tummed to see where the sound came from. Sati, who had come out on her balcony, continued. Please accept my apologies for interrupting you, Governor, said Sati with a formal namaste. But Tarak's interpretation of the law is fail. I am terribly sorry to have disturbed the yajna. My entourage and I shall leave the city immediately. We will return by the beginning of the third prahar, by which time the ceremony should be over. Shiva clenched his fist. He frantically wanted to wring Tarak's neck, but he controlled himself. With superhuman effort, within minutes Sati was out of the guest house, along with Kritika and 5 personal bodyguards. Shiva tummed to look at Nandi and Veerbhadra, both of whom rose to join Sati. They understood that Shiva wanted them to ensure her safety outside the city. It is disgusting that you did not realize this yourself, Tarak said to Sati. What kind of a princess are you? Don't you respect the law? Sati looked at Tarak, her face calm. She refused to be drawn into a debate and waited patiently for her guards to prepare the horses. I don't understand what a Vaikama woman is doing traveling with the convoy of the Nilkanth. She is polluting the entire journey, raged Tarak. Enough, intervened Shiva. Princess Sati is leaving with dignity. Stop your diatribe. Right, I will not, screeched Tarak. What kind of a leader are you? You are challenging Lord Ram's laws. Tarak, yelled JHCH 31 Ishwar. The Lord Nilkanth has the right to challenge the law. If you value your life, you will not defy his authority. I am a Meluhan, shrieked Tarak. It is my right to challenge anyone breaking the law. A Dhobi, a mere washerman, challenged Lord Ram. It was his greatness that he acceded to the man's objection and renounced his wife. I would urge the Nilkanth to learn from Lord Ram's example and use his brain while making decisions. Enough, Tarak, erupted Sati. The entire congregation was stunned into silence by Tank's remark. But not Sati. Something inside her snapped. She had tolerated too many insults for tchd long. And she had endured them with quiet dignity. But this time, this man had insulted Shiva. Her Shiva, she finally acknowledged to herself. I invoke the right of Agnipaksha, said Sati, back in control. The stunned onlookers could not believe their ears. Amal be fire. This was getting worse by the minute. Agnipariksha, a duel unto death, enabled a contestant to challenge an unjust tormentor. It was called Agnipariksha as combat would be conducted within a ring of fire. There was no escape from the ring. The duelists had to keep fighting till one person either surrendered or died. An Agnipariksha was extremely rare these days. And for a woman to invoke the right was almost unheard of. There is no reason for this, my lady, pleaded Julswar. Just like his subjects, he was terrified that Princess Sati might be killed in his city. The gargantuan Tarak would certainly slay her. The emperor's wrath would be terrible. Coming to Tarak, Julswar ordered, you will not accept this challenge. And be called a coward. You want to prove your bravery, spoke Patviteshwar for the first time. Then fight me. I will act as Sati's second for the challenge. Only I have the right to appoint a second, Pitratuba, said Sati, reverentially referring to Parvateshwar as being like a // Coming to Tarak, she said, I am appointing no second. You will fight with me. You will do no such thing, Tank Brahaspati objected this time. Tarak, the only reason you won't fight is if you are afraid of being killed, said Shiva. Every person tummed towards the Nilkanth, shocked by his words. Coming to Sati, Shiva continued, citizens of Karakarpa, I have seen the princess fight. She can defeat anyone. Even the gods. Sati stared at Shiva, shocked. I accept the challenge, growled Tarak. Sati nodded at Tarak, climbed on her white steed and tummed to leave. At the edge of the square, she pulled up her horse and tummed to take one more look at Shiva. She smiled at him, tummed and rode away. Ksata 49. It was the beginning of the third prahar when Shiva and Brahaspati stole quietly into the local Wayfish Grabar, the exercise ball, to observe Tarak exercising along with two partners. The daft yajna had been a disaster. With everyone petrified that the princess would die the next day, no one was inclined to participate in the ceremony. However, as the yajna had been called, it had to be conducted or the gods would be offended. The congregation went through the motions and the yajna was called to a close. Tarak's famed fearsome blows on his hapless partners filled Brahaspati's soul with dread, and he came to an immediate decision. "I'll assassinate him tonight. She will not die tomorrow." Shiva tummed in stunned disbelief towards the chief scientist. "Brahaspati. What are you? Sati is too noble to meet a fate such as this. I am willing to sacrifice my life and reputation for her." "But you are a Brahmin. You are not supposed to kill." "I'll do it for you," whispered Brahaspati, emotions clouding his judgment. "You will not lose her, my friend." Shiva came close to Brahaspati and hugged him. "Don't corrupt your soul, my friend. I am not worth such a big sacrifice." Brahaspati clung to Shiva. Stepping back, Shiva whispered, "In any case, your sacrifice is not required. For as sure as the sun rises in the east, Sati will defeat Tarak tomorrow." Ksata 49. A few hours into the third prahar, Sati returned to the guest house. She did not go up to her room, but summoned Nandi and Veerbhadra to the central courtyard, drew her sword and began her practice with them. A little later Parvateshwar walked in, looking broken. His expression clearly conveyed his fear that this might be the last time he would talk to Sati. She stopped practicing, sheathed her sword and folded her hands into a respectful namaste. "Pitratulya," she whispered. Parvateshwar came close to Sati, his face distraught. She could not be sure, but it seemed as if he had been crying. She had never seen even a hint of a tear in his confident eyes. "My child," mumbled Parvateshwar. "I am doing what I think is right," said Sati. "I am happy." Parvateshwar couldn't find the strength to say anything for a brief moment. He considered assassinating Tarak at night, but that would be illegal. Just then, Shiva and Brahaspati walked in. Shiva noticed Parvateshwar's face. This was the first time he had seen any sign of weakness in the general. While he could understand Parvateshwar's predicament, he did not like the effect it was having on Sati. "I am sorry I am late," said Shiva cheerily. Everyone turned to look at him. "Actually, Brahaspati and I had gone to the Lord Varun temple to pray for Tarak," said Shiva. "We prayed that the Jami his soul would take to the other world would be comfortable." Sati burst out laughing. "So did the rest of the party in the courtyard." "Bhadra, you are not the right opponent for the practice," said Shiva. "You move too fast. Nandi, you duel with the princess and control your agility." Turning to Sati, Shiva continued, "I saw Tarak practice. His blows have tremendous power. But the force of the blows slows him down. Turn his strength into his weakness. Use your agility against his movements." Sati nodded, absorbing every word. She resumed her practice with Nandi. Moving rapidly compared to Nandi's slower movements, Sati was able to succeed in a strike that could kill suddenly. An idea struck Shiva. Instructing Nandi to stop, he asked Sati, "Are you allowed to choose the combat weapon?" "Yes. It's my prerogative," as I threw the challenge, "then the knife. It will reduce the reach of his strikes while Pew would be able to move in and out much quicker." "That's brilliant," concurred Parvateshwar, while Brahaspati nodded. Sati signaled her agreement immediately. Almost at the same instant, Veerbhadra emerged with avo knives. Giving one to Nandi, he gave the other to Sati. "Practice, my lady." Sati and Tarak stood at the center of a circular stadium. This was not the main Rangbhumi of Karakarpa, which was huge in its proportions. This one had been constructed next to the main stadium, for music concerts that the Mesopotamian immigrants in Kamshapar loved. The arena evas of the exact dimensions required for an Agnipariksha not so big that a person could simply steer clear of the other contestant and not too small so that the combat would end too soon. There were stands around the ground and a capacity crowd of over 20,000 had come to watch the most important duel in Karakapa for the last 500 years. A silent prayer sprang to every lip. Work a miracle, O Father Manu, let Princess Sati win. Or at the very least, live. Both Tarak and Sati greeted each other with an namaste, repeating an ancient pledge to fight with honor. Then, coming towards the statue of Lord Varun at the top of the main stand, they bowed and asked for blessings from the god of the water and the seas. Jules Hor had vacated his ceremonial seat right below the statue of Lord Varun for Shiva. The governor sat to Shiva's left with Ayavati and Kritika to his left. Brahaspati and Parvateshwar sat to Shiva's right. Nandi and Veerbhadra were in their now familiar position, behind Shiva. A bird courier had been sent to Daksha the previous day, informing him of the duel. However, there wasn't enough time to expect a reply. At long last, Jules Hor stood up. He was nervous about the Agnipuncture, but appeared composed. In keeping with the custom, he raised a balled fist to his heart and boomed. Sara. Dame. Man. An invocation to truth. Duty. Honor. The rest of the stadium rang in agreement. Satya. Dharma, Man. Tarak and Sati echoed Satya. Dharma. Man. Jules Hor nodded to the stadium keeper who lit the ceremonial oil lamp with the holy fire. The lamp spilled its fire onto the oil channel, the periphery of the central ground was aflame. The ring for the pariksha had been set. Jules Hor turned to Shiva. My lord, your instructions to begin the duel. Shiva looked at Sati with a confident smile. Then coming to the stadium, he declared loudly, truth will always triumph in the purifying fire of Lord Agni. Tarak and Sati immediately drew their knives. Tarak held his knife in front of him, like most traditional fighters. He had chosen a strategy that played to his strengths. Keeping his knife in front of him allowed him to strike the moment Sati came close. He did not stir too much, allowing Sati to make her moves in front of him. Sati, breaking all known rules of combat, held her knife behind her. She shifted the knife continuously from one hand to the other, while keeping a safe distance from her opponent. The aim was to confuse Tarak about the direction of her attack. Tarak on the other hand was watching Sati's movements like a hawk. He saw her right arm flex. The knife was now in her right hand. Suddenly Sati leapt to the left. Tarak remained stationary. He knew that with her right hand holding the knife, the movement evas a feint. She would have to move to the right to bring her knife into play. Sure enough, moving quickly to the right, Sati swung her stabbing arm in an arc at Tarak's torso. But Tarak evas prepared. Shifting his knife quickly to his left hand, he slashed viciously, cutting Sati across her torso. It wasn't a deep cut, but it appeared to hurt. The audience let out a collective gasp. Sati retreated and rallied. She moved the knife to her back again, transferring it from one hand to the other. Tarak kept a close eye on her arms. The knife was in her left hand. He expected her to move to the right, which she did. He remained immobile, waiting for her to swerve suddenly to her left. She did, swinging her left arm as she moved. Tarak acted before her arm could even come close enough to do any damage. He swung ferociously with his right arm and cut her deep in the left shoulder. Sati retreated rapidly as the congregation moaned in horror. Some shut their eyes. They could not bear to look anymore. Most were praying fervently. If it had to be done, let it be done swiftly and not in a slow painful manner. What is she doing? Whispered a panic-stricken Brahaspati to Shiva. Why is she charging in so recklessly? Shiva turned to look at Brahaspati, also noticing Parvateshwar's face. Parvateshwar had a surprised, yet admiring grin on his face. Unlike Brahaspati, he knew what was going on. Coming back to look at the jewel, Shiva whispered, "She's laying a trap." At the center, Sati was still transferring the knife between her hands behind her back. She moved from her right to the left, but this time did not transfer the knife. She flexed her left arm, keeping the right arm holding the knife loose and relaxed. Tarak was watching Sati closely, confident that he was going to slowly bleed her to death. He believed the knife was in her left hand. He waited for her to move to the right, and then to the left, which she did in a swift veer. Expecting her left arm to come in, he sliced with his right hand. Sati neatly pirouetted back. Before a surprised Tarak could react, Sati had leapt to her right and brought her right hand in brutally onto his chest. The knife pierced Tarak's lung. The shock of the blow immobilized him. Blood spurted from his mouth. He dropped his knife and staggered back. Sati ruthlessly maintained the pressure and dug the knife in deeper, right up to the hilt. Tarak stumbled back and collapsed onto the ground, motionless. The entire stadium was stunned. Sati's face had the expression of the mother goddess in fury. 85 years of repressed anger had surfaced in that instant. She pulled the knife out, slowly twisting it to inflict maximum damage. Blood spewed out from Tarak's mouth at an alarming rate. Gripping the knife in both hands, she raised her arms, aiming at Tarak's heart for a quick kill. Unexpectedly though, her expression then transformed from rage to serenity. It was almost as if someone had sucked out all the negative energy from within her. She turned around. Shiva, the destroyer of evil, sat on his throne, staring at her with a slight smile. Then she looked at Tarak, and whispered, "I forgive you." The stadium erupted in joy. Even if Indvarun himself had scripted the fight, it wouldn't have been so perfect. It had everything that the Surivanshis held dear. Defiant when under pressure, yet magnanimous in victory, Sati raised her knife and shouted, "Jai Shri Ram." The entire stadium repeated, "Jai Shri Ram." Sati turned towards Shiva and roared once again, "Jai Shri Ram." Shiva's words were clogged by the knot in his throat. "The Lord won't mind this time if I don't complete the cry." Shiva glanced from Sati, lest he show his tears to the woman he loved. Regaining control of himself, he looked back at her with a radiant smile. Sati continued to stare at Shiva. Emotions that had been dormant in her for too long rippled through her being as she saw Shiva's admiration. When she couldn't bear it any longer, she shut her eyes. Chapter 16 The Sun and Earth. There was an impromptu celebration that night in Karakapa. Their princess was safe. The insufferable Tarak had been defeated. Many people in Karakapa believed that even his own mother must have loathed the surly preacher. He had few supporters in the liberal city. But there were rules for duels. Hence the moment Sati had forgiven Tarak, paramedics had rushed in to take him to the hospital. Surgeons had labored for 6 hours to save his life. Much to the dismay of the townfolk, they had succeeded. "Have you heard about the poem of the sun and the earth?" Sati asked Shiva. They were standing on the balcony of the governor's palace while a boisterous party raged inside. "No," said Shiva with a seductive grin, coming a little closer to her. "But I'd love to hear it." "Apparently the earth sometimes thinks of the possibility of coming closer to the sun," said Sati. "But she can't do that. She is so base and his brilliance so searing, that she will cause destruction if she draws him closer." "What now?" "I disagree," said Shiva. "I think the sun bums for only as long as the earth is close to him. If the earth wasn't there, there would be no reason for the sun to exist. The sun doesn't exist merely for the earth. It exists for every single planet in the solar system. Isn't it really up to the sun to determine whom he chooses to exist for?" "No," said a melancholic Sati, looking at Shiva. "The moment he becomes the sun, he answers a higher calling. He does not exist for himself, he exists for the greater good. His luminosity is the lifeblood of the solar system. And if the Earth has any sense of responsibility, she will not do anything to destroy this balance. So what should the sun do? Asked Shiva, his hurt and anger showing on his face. Just waste his entire life bumming away, looking at the Earth from a distance. The Earth isn't going anywhere. The sun and the Earth can still share a warm friendship, but anything more is against the laws. It is against the interests of others. Shiva turned away from Sati in anger. He looked northward to seek solace from his holy lake. Feeling nothing, he looked up at the skies, towards the gods he did not believe in. Damn it! His clenched fist struck the balcony railing powerfully, dislodging some bricks before he stormed off. Outside the city walls, in a forested area, a few soldiers lay in wait. At a slight distance, two hooded figures were seated on large rocks. The captain of the platoon of soldiers rigid in attention next to the duo. He scarce believed that he was standing next to the queen herself. The privilege overwhelmed him. One of the hooded figures raised his hand to motion for the captain to step closer. On the hooded figure's wrist was a leather bracelet with the serpent arm. Vishwadhyamna, are you sure this is where we are supposed to meet him? He is late by nearly an hour. Yes, my lord, replied Vishwadhyamna nervously. This is exactly where he had said he would come. The other hooded figure turned and spoke in a commanding voice, a feminine one. A 173 is used to being obeyed without question. That man makes the queen of the Nagas wait. Turning to the other hooded figure, she continued, see, I trust you have MDI'd this out in detail. I hope I haven't entered this vile territory in vain. The other hooded figure moved his fleshy hands in a motion asking the queen for patience. Have faith, your highness. This man is our key to giving the Surya /Ranchis a blow that they will never recover from. Apparently, there was an Agnipariksha fight between the princess and a man in the city yesterday, said Vishwadhyamna suddenly, trying to impress the queen with his sharp ear for local knowledge. I do not have the exact details. I just hope that our man was not involved in it. The queen turned swiftly to the other hooded figure. Then back to Vishwadhyamna _ please wait with the other soldiers. Vishwadhyamna sensed he had said something he shouldn't have and quickly retreated before his lord's stern gaze could reprimand him. This is why he had been told in training school that a good soldier never speaks unless spoken to. She's here, asked the queen with barely suppressed anger. The other hooded figure nodded. I thought I'd told you to forget about this, said the queen sternly. There is nothing to be gained by this quest. Do you realize that your stupid attack on Mount Manda might have led them to suspect that we have a mole in the midst? The male figure looked up in apology. Did you come here for her? No, your highness, said the hooded figure with a deeply respectful tone. This was the place where he asked us to meet him. The queen reached her hand out and gently patted the man's shoulder. Stay focused, my child, said the queen softly. If we pull this off, it will be our biggest victory ever. Like you just said, we will strike a blow that they will find very difficult to recover from. The man nodded. And yet, continued the queen, pulling her hand back into the shelter of her black robes, her preoccupation with her provokes you into making uncharacteristic decisions. Are you aware of his clear message that she cannot be touched? Otherwise, the deal is off. The hooded figure stared at the queen in surprise. How did you? I am the queen of the Nagas, my child, she interrupted. I have more than one piece on the chessboard. The hooded figure continued to look at the queen, ashamed about his poor call at Mount Mandan. The queen's next words added to his shame. You are making surprising mistakes, my child. You have the potential to be the greatest Naga ever. Don't waste it. Yes, your highness. The queen appeared to relax. I think when we are alone now, said the queen, Maila, you can call me Morsi. After all, I am your mother's sister. Of course, you are, said the hooded figure as a smile reached his eyes. Whatever you say, Morsa _ it had been 2 weeks since the Agnipariksha _ Sati had recovered sufficiently for the convoy to continue its journey to its next destination. Shiva, Parvateshwar and Brahaspati sat together in Shiva's chambers at the guest house. Is agreed then, said Parvateshwar _ I will make the arrangements for us to commence our journey a week from today. By that time, Sati should have recovered completely. Yes, I think that is a suitable plan, agreed Shiva. Parvateshwar, I will not be accompanying you any further, said Brahaspati _ Why, asked Parvateshwar _ Well, the new chemicals that I had ordered have arrived. I was considering going back with the consignment to Mount Manda so that the experiments can begin as SCH3N as possible. If we can get this right, then the consumption of water for making the samras will reduce drastically. Shiva smiled sadly. I am going to miss you, my friend. And you, said Brahaspati _ But I am not leaving the country. When you finish your tour, come to Mount Manda _ I'll take you around the sylvan forests near our facility. Yes, said Shiva with a grin. Perhaps you will reveal some of your scientific skills and discover a plausible explanation for the blue throat. Both Shiva and Brahaspati burst out laughing. Parvateshwar, who did not understand the private joke, looked on politely. Just one point, Brahaspati said. Parvateshwar _ I will not be able to divert any soldiers from the royal entourage. I will speak with Governor Juleshwar about sending soldiers along with you on your return journey. Thank you, Parvateshwar _ But I am sure I will be fine. Why should a terrorist be interested in me? There was another terrorist attack yesterday in a village some 50 kilometers from Mohenjo-daro, said Parvateshwar _ The entire temple was destroyed and all the Brahmins killed. Another one, said Shiva, angered. That is the third attack this month. Yes, said Parvateshwar _ They are getting bolder. And as usual, they escaped before any backup could arrive to give them a real fight. Shiva clenched his fists. He had no idea how to counter the terror attacks. There was no way in which one could prepare for them since nobody knew where they would strike next. Was attacking Swadweep, the Chandravansh's own country, the only way to stop this? Brahaspati kept quiet, sensing Shiva's inner turmoil. He knew there were no easy answers. Looking at Shiva, Parvateshwar continued, I will also get my people to make preparations for our journey. I'll meet you in the evening for dinner. I think Sati can finally join us. I will send instructions for Nandi and Veerbhadra to also join us. I know you like Thiel company. Shiva was startled by Parvateshwar's uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. Thank you, Parvateshwar _ This is very kind of you. But I believe Klitika, Nandi and Veerbhadra are going to a flute recital tonight. That crazy Veerbhadra has even bought some jewels so that he won't look like a country bumpkin next to Nandi. Parvateshwar smiled politely. But it will be a pleasure to dine with you, said Shiva. Thank you, said Parvateshwar as he got up. After a few steps, he stopped and turned around. Overcoming his hesitation, he mumbled. Shilpa. Yes. Shiva got up. I don't think we've talked about this, said Parvateshwar, uncomfortable. But I would like to thank you for helping Sati in her Agnipariksha _ It was your clear thinking which led to victory. No, said Shiva. It was her brilliance. Of course it was, said Parvateshwar _ But you gave her the confidence and the strategy to show her brilliance. If there is any person in the world that I relate to with a feeling beyond a sense of duty, it is Sati. I thank you for helping her. You are welcome, smiled Shiva, with enough sense to not embarrass Parvateshwar further by lengthening this conversation. Parvateshwar smiled and folded his hands into a namaste. While he had still not fallen prey to the countrywide Neelkanth fever, he was beginning to respect Shiva. Aiming Parvateshwar's esteem was a long journey that Shiva had only just begun. The general turned around and walked out of the room. He is not a bad sort, said Brahaspati, looking at Parvateshwar's retreating back. He may be a little surly. But he is one of the most honest Saravanshis I have ever met, a true follower of Lord Ram. I hope you don't get too upset by the ill-tempered things he says to you. I don't, said Shiva. In fact, I think very highly of Parvateshwar. He is one man whose respect I would certainly like to earn. Brahaspati smiled, seeing yet another instance of Shiva's large heart. He leaned closer and said, "You are a." Shiva smiled back. "I had not answered you the last time you had asked me," Shiva continued. Brahaspati honestly, "I have never believed in the legend of the Neelkanth. I still don't." Shiva's smile became a little broader. "But I believe in you. If there is one person capable of sucking the negative energy out of this land, I think it will be you. And I will do all I can to help you. In whatever way I can. You are the brother I never had, Brahaspati. Your mere presence is all the help I need." Saying so, Shiva embraced his friend. Brahaspati hugged Shiva back warmly, feeling a sense of renewed energy course through him. He swore once again that he would never back off from his mission. No matter what. It wasn't just for Meluha. It was also for Shiva, his friend. Over 3 weeks after Sati's Agnipariksha, the 7 Carnage convoy set off from Karakapar. Moving in a column. 6 of them were dummies as compared to the usual 5. In the 3rd Carnage, Shiva sat with Sati along with Parvateshwar and Ayavati. It was the first time that Parvateshwar was travelling in the same carriage as Shiva. Kritika had volunteered to ride, claiming that she was missing the scenic beauty of the countryside. Veerbhadra was more than pleased to ride along with her in Nandi's platoon. They had journeyed just a few days away from Karakapar when the convoy was brought to a halt by a large caravan travelling hurriedly in the opposite direction. Parvateshwar stepped out of the carriage to inquire. Brigadier Vreka came up to Parvateshwar and executed a military salute. "What is the matter?" "My lord, they are refugees from the village of Kunj," said Vreka. "They are escaping a terrorist attack." "Escaping?" asked a surprised Parvateshwar. "You mean the attack is still on?" "I think so, my I'd," said Vreka, his face filled with rage. "God damn it, square 7 Parvateshwar. Neither Meluha nor he had ever got an opportunity like this. To be present at the right time and right place with 1,500 soldiers while a terrorist attack was in progress. And yet, Parvateshwar's hands were tied. He was not allowed to take on any mission except to protect the Neelkanth and the princess. What nonsense, he thought to himself. My orders forbid me from following my Kshatriya Dharma. What's the matter, Parvateshwar? Parvateshwar turned to find Shiva right behind him. Sati and Ayavati were getting out of the carnage as well. Before Parvateshwar could answer, a horrible noise tore through the quiet forest road. It was a sound Shiva had come to recognize. It declared the evil intentions of the conch shell bearer, loud and clear. It announced that an attack had begun. Chapter 17. The Battle of Kunj. "Where are they?" asked Parvateshwar. "They are in my village, my lord," said the scared village headman. "Is a short distance from here. Some 500 Chandravanshi soldiers, led by 5 Nagas. They gave us 30 minutes to leave. But the Brahmins at the temple were detained." Parvateshwar clenched his fists to regain his control despite his fury. "Our Pandit is a good man, my end," said the village headman. Tears streamed out of his eyes. Vreka put a comforting hand on the headman's shoulder. But the gesture only made the headman even more miserable. Not knowing the fate of the village priest added to his guilt. "We wanted to stay and fight alongside our Pandit and the other Brahmins," sobbed the headman. "They are men of God. They don't even know how to raise a weapon. How can they fight against this horde?" Vreka let go of the headman as anger got the better of him. "But Panditji ordered us to leave. He told us to flee our women and children. He said he would face whatever Lord Brahma has written in his fate. But if anyone deserves to be saved, it is them." Parvateshwar's nails dug into his skin. He was livid at the cowardly Chandravanshis for yet again attacking defenseless Brahmins and not Kshatriyas who could retaliate. He was incensed with his fate for having put him in a position where he could not take action. A part of him wanted to ignore his orders. But he was bound not to break the law. This nonsense has to stop. Parvati's looked up to see which voice had echoed his thoughts. The expression on Shiva's face almost rocked him back on his feet for a moment. The intense fury visible in the Nilkanth would have brought even a deva to a standstill. "We are good people," raged Shiva. "We are not scared chicken who should turn and flee. Those terrorists should be on the run. They should be the ones feeling the wrath of the Suryavanshis." A villager standing behind the headman said, "But they are terrorists. We cannot defeat them." The Pandijai knew it. That is why he ordered us to run. "But we have 1,500 soldiers," said Shiva, irritated with the display of such cowardice. "And there are another 500 of you. We outnumber them 4-1. We can crush them. Teach them a lesson they will remember," the headman argued. "But they have Nagas. They are supernatural, BLCH 3D thirsty killers. What chance do we have against such evil?" Shiva had the presence of mind to realize that superstition can only be countered by another stronger belief. He climbed the carnage pedestal to stand tall. The villagers stared at him. He ripped off his cravat and threw it away. He didn't need it anymore. "I am the Nilkanth." All the soldiers looked up mesmerized at the destroyer of evil. They were overpowered to see him truly accept his destiny. Those ignorant of the Nilkantha's arrival beheld the living legend in a daze. "I am going to fight these terrorists," roared Shiva. "I am going to show them that we are not scared anymore. I am going to make them feel the pain we feel. I am going to let them know that Meluha is not going to roll over and let them do what they want." Pure energy coursed through the huddled mass that stood in front of Shiva, straightening their spines and inspiring their souls. "Who's coming with me?" "I am," bellowed Parvati, feeling the suffocating restraints imposed on him fall away by Shiva's pronouncement. "I am," echoed Sati, Nandi, Veerbhadra and Vraka. "I am," echoed every single soul standing there. Suddenly the scared villagers and soldiers were transformed into a righteous army. The soldiers drew their swords. The villagers grabbed whatever weapons they could from the traveling armor. "Yuri_to_Kunj," yelled Shiva, mounting a horse and galloping ahead. Parvati and Sati quickly unharnessed the horses from the cart and raced behind Shiva. The Suryavanshis charged behind them, letting out a cry louder than any Naga conch shell. As they stormed into Kuni, the horror of what had transpired hit them. The Chandravanshis had ignored the rest of the village and concentrated on the area that would distress the Meluhans the most, their venerated temple. Decapitated bodies of the Brahmins lay around the shrine. They had been gathered together and executed. The temple itself was ruthlessly destroyed and set aflame. The gruesome sight enraged the Suryavanshis. They charged like crazed bulls. The Chandravanshis stood no chance. They were completely outnumbered and overwhelmed. They lost ground quickly. Just as the Chandravanshis began to retreat, the 5 Nagas rallied them around. Against crushing odds, the Nagas grimly fought the righteous Suryavanshis with unexpected grit. Parvati fought like a man possessed. Shiva, who had never seen the general battle, was impressed with his skill and valor. Like Shiva, Parvati knew that the key to victory were the Nagas. As long as they were alive, the Suryavanshis would feel terrified and the Chandravanshis would draw inspiration from them. He attacked one of them with frenzied aggression. The Naga skillfully parried Parvati's attack with his shield. Bringing his sword down, he tried to strike Parvati's exposed shoulder. What he didn't know was that Parvati had deliberately left his flank exposed. Swinging to the side to avoid the blow, Parvati let his shield clap to his back as he swiftly drew a knife held in a clip behind. He hurled it at the Naga's exposed right shoulder. His cry told Parvati that the knife had penetrated deep. The injured Naga roared defiant. To Parvati's utter amazement, he swung his sword arm, with the knife still buried in his shoulder, and brought it back into play with an agonizing grunt. Parvati brought his shield back up and blocked the slightly weaker strike from the Nagam. He brought his sword up and a stab, but the Naga was too quick and deflected it, swerving left, rammed his shield down hard on the knife still buried in the Naga's shoulder. The knife chipped through the shoulder bone. The Naga snarled in pain and stumbled. That was the opening that Parvati needed. Bringing his sword up in a brutal upward stab, he pushed it ruthlessly through the Naga's heart. The Naga froze as Parvati's sword ripped the life out of him. Patviteshwar pushed his sword in deeper, completing the kill. The Naga fell back motionless. Parvati was not above the Meluhan fascination with a Naga face. He knelt down and tore the Naga's mask off to reveal a horrifying countenance. The Naga's nose was pure bone and had grown to almost form a bird-like beak. His ears were ridiculously large while his mouth was grotesquely constricted. He looked like a vulture in human form. Parvati quickly whispered what every Surivanshi said when he brought down a worthy opponent: "Have a safe journey to the other side, brave warrior." 1 down 4 to go, thought Parvati rising. Correction, 2 down, 3 to go. He saw Shiva bring down a gigantic Naga in the distance. Both Shiva and Parvati looked at each other and nodded. Shiva pointed towards back. Parvati tummed to see a ferocious Naga fighting 5 Surivanshis single-handedly. He tummed back to look at Shiva and nodded. Shiva tummed to charge at another Naga as Parvati tummed towards the one marked for him. Shiva dashed through the pitched battle scene towards the Naga who had just killed a Surivanshi soldier. He leapt high as he ran in close, with his shield in front to prevent a swinging strike. The Naga had brought his own shield up to prevent what he expected from Shiva, the orthodox up-to-down swinging strike from a good height. Shiva, however, surprised him by thrusting in his sword sideward, neatly circumventing the Naga's shield and gashing his arm. The Naga bellowed in pain and fell back. He straightened and held his shield high again, realizing that Shiva was going to be a much more formidable enemy. As Shiva grimly fought the fearless Naga, he did not notice another one at a distance. This Naga could see that their assault was being progressively pushed back. It was a matter of time before the Nagas and the Chandravanshis would have to retreat. This Naga would have to face the ignominy of having led the first failed attack. And he could see that it was Shiva who had led the counter-offensive. That man had to be destroyed for the future of the mission. The Naga drew his bow forward. Shiva meanwhile, of the danger, had wedged his sword a little into the Naga's stomach. The Naga grimly fought on, stepping back slowly while ramming Shiva with his shield. He tried in vain to swing his sword down to slice Shiva, who kept his own shield at the ready. Shiva kept fending the Naga's blows while pressing ahead, pushing the sword in deeper and deeper. In a few more seconds, the Naga's soul gave up. It slipped away as his body bled to death and collapsed. Shiva looked down at the fallen Naga in awe. These people mgvb evil, but a fearless soldiers. Shiva to the left to find that Parvati's TCH3 had killed the Naga he had engaged. He continued to tum slowly, trying to find the last Naga. Then he heard a loud shout from the person he had come to love beyond reason. Shiva tummed to his right to find Sati racing towards him. He looked behind her to see if anyone was chasing her. There was nobody. He frowned. Before he could react, Sati leapt forward. A jump timed to perfection. The Naga at the distance had released the Agnibaran, or the fire arrow, one of the legendary poisoned arrows of their people. The venom on its tip burned its victim's body from the inside, causing a slow, painful death that would scar the soul for many births. The arrow had been aimed at Shiva's neck. It sped unerringly on its deadly mission. However, the Naga had not calculated the possibility of someone obstructing its path. Sati misted her body in midair as she leapt in front of Shiva. The arrow slammed into her chest with brutal force, propelling her airborne body backward. She fell to Shiva's left, limp and motionless. A stunned Shiva stared at Sati's prone body, his heart shattering. The destroyer of evil roared in fury. He charged at the Naga like a wild elephant on the brink of insanity, his sword raised. The Naga was momentarily staggered by the fearsome sight of the charging Neelkanth, but to his credit, he rallied. He swiftly drew another arrow from his quiver, loaded it and let it fly. Shiva swung his sword to deflect the arrow, barely missing a step or decreasing his manic speed. The increasingly panic-stricken Naga loaded another arrow and shot again. Shiva swung his sword once more, deflecting the arrow easily, picking up more speed. The Naga reached back to draw another arrow. But it was too late. With a fierce yell, Shiva leapt high as he neared the Naga. He swung his sword viciously, decapitating the Naga with one swing of his sword. The Naga's lifeless body fell in a heap as his severed head flew with the mighty blow, while his still pumping heart spewed blood through the gaping neck. The Neelkantha's vengeance was not quenched. Screaming, Shiva bent down and kept hacking at the Naga's inert body, ruthlessly slashing it to bits. No assertion of reason, no articulation of sanity could have penetrated Shiva's enraged mind. Except for a soft, muffled, injured voice that was barely audible in the din of battle. But he heard her. Shiva he turned back to look at Sati lying in the distance, her head raised slightly. Sati. He sped towards her, bellowing Parvatshwar. Get Ayurvati. Sati has fallen. Ayan, Kati had already seen Sati's injured body. The Chandravanshis were retreating in haste. Ayurvati round Sati, as did Parvatshwar. On hearing Shiva's call, Shiva reached her first. She was motionless, but alive. She breathing heavily as the arrow had pierced her left lung, flooding her innards with her blood. She couldn't speak as the force of the blow had made the blood gush from her mouth. But she continued to stare at Shiva. Her face had a strange smile, almost serene. She kept opening her mouth as if trying to say something. Shiva desperately wanted to hold her, but he kept his hands locked together as he tried frantically to control his tears. "O Lord Brahma," cried Ayurvati as she reached Sati and recognized the arrow. "Mastrak. Dhruvinai. Get a stretcher. Now." Parvatshwar, Ayurvati, Mastrak and Dhruvinai carried Sati to one of the village houses with Shiva following closely. Ayurvati's other assistants had already begun cleaning the hut and setting the instruments for the surgery. "Wait outside, my lord," said Ayurvati to Shiva, raising her hand. Shiva wanted to follow Ayurvati into the hut, but Parvatshwar held him back by touching his shoulder. "Ayurvati is one of the best doctors in the world, Shiva. Let her do her job." Shiva turned to look at Parvatshwar, who was doing an admirable job of controlling his emotions. But it took one look into his eyes for Shiva to know that Parvatshwar was as afraid for Sati as he was. Probably more than he had been before Sati's Agampariksha. Suddenly a thought struck Shiva. He turned and hurried to the closest Naga body. Bending quickly, he checked the right wrist. Finding nothing there, he turned and rushed to the other Naga dead body. Meanwhile, Parvatshwar had rallied his disturbed mind enough to realize the important tasks that needed to be done. He beckoned Vreka and ordered, "Place guards over the prisoners of war. Get doctors to attend to all the injured, including the Chandravanshis." "The injured Chandravanshis have already taken their poison, my lord," said Vreka. "You know they will never want to be caught alive." Parvatshwar at Vreka with a withering look, clearly indicating that he wasn't interested in the details and Vreka should get to the task at hand. "Yes, my lord," said Vreka, acknowledging Parvatshwar's silent order. "Arrange a perimeter for any counter-attack," continued Parvatshwar, his consciousness already drawn back to Sati's condition in the house behind him. And Vreka looked up at Parvatshwar, surprised by his lord's hesitation. He had never seen his lord hesitate before. But Vreka had the good sense to not say anything. He waited for his lord to complete his statement. "And continued Parvatshwar, there should be some courier pigeons still alive in the temple. Send a red-colored letter to Devajayari _ to the Emperor. Tell him Princess Sati is seriously in pred _ Vraka looked up in disbelief. He had not heard about Sati. But wisely, he did not say anything. Tell the Emperor, continued Parvati, that she has been shot by an Agnibaran _ O Lord Indra, blurted Vraka, unable to control his shocked dismay. Do it now, Brigadier, snarled Parvati _ Yes, my lord, said Vraka with a weak salute. Shiva meanwhile had already checked the wrists of 4 of the Nagas _ none of them wore the leather bracelet with the serpent arm that Shiva had come to recognize. He reached the last one. The one who had shot Sati. The wretched one who Shiva had hacked. Shiva kicked the Naga's torso with intense hatred before trying to find his right arm. It took him some time to find the severed limb. Locating it, he raised the remnants of the robe to check the wrist. There was no leather bracelet, it wasn't him. Shiva came back to the hut to find Parvati seated on a stool outside. Kritika was standing beside the hut entrance, sobbing uncontrollably. Veerbhadra was holding her gently, comforting her. A distraught Nandi stood at Veerbhadra's side, his face stunned into a blank expression. Parvati looked up at Shiva and pointed to the empty stool next to him with a weak smile. He was making brave attempts to appear under control. Shiva sat down slowly and looked into the distance, waiting for Ayurvati to come out. We have removed the arrow, my lord, said Ayurvati _ Shiva and Parvati were standing in the hut, looking at an unconscious Sati. Nobody else was allowed in. Ayurvati had clearly stated that Sati did not need the risk of increased infection. And nobody dared argue with the formidable Ayurvati on medical matters. Mastrak and Dhruvinai had already fanned out to support the other medical officers treating the injured Surivanshi soldiers. Shiva tumbed towards the right side of the bed and saw the blooded tongue that had Arun used to stretch Sati's innards so that the arrow could be pulled out. That tongue would never be used again _ it had been infected with the Agnibaran poison. No amount of heat or chemicals would make the instrument sterile and safe again. Next to the tongue lay the offending arrow, wrapped in neem leaves, where it would stay for 1 full day, before being buried deep in a dry grave to ensure that it would not cause any more harm. Shiva looked at Ayurvati, his eyes moist, unable to find the strength to ask the question that raged in his heart. I will not lie to you, my lord, said Ayurvati, in the detached manner that doctors will themselves into, to find the strength in traumatic circumstances. It doesn't look good. Nobody in history has survived an Agnibaran which has one of the vital organs. The poison will start causing an intense fever sometime, which will result in the failing of one organ after another. Helplessly Shiva looked at Sati and then turned pleadingly towards Ayurvati, who fought hard to rein in her tears and retain her composure. She couldn't afford to lose control. She had many lives to save in the next few hours. I am sorry, my lord, said Ayurvati _ but there really is no cure. We can only give some medicines to make her end easier. Shiva glared angrily at Ayurvati _ we are not giving up. Is that clear? Ayan, Kati looked at the ground, unable to meet Shiva's eye. If the fever is kept under control, then her organs will not be damaged, right? Asked Shiva, as a glimmer of hope entered his being. Ayan, Kati looked up and said, yes, my lord. But that is not a final solution. The fever caused by an Agnibaran can only be delayed, not broken. If we try and control the fever, it will come back even stronger once the medicines are stopped. Then we will control the fever forever, cried Shiva. I will sit by her side all my life if needed. The fever will not rise. Ayan, Kati was about to say something to Shiva, but thought better of it and kept silent. She would come back to Shiva in a few hours. She knew that Sati could not be saved. It was impossible. Precious time was being wasted in this futile discussion. Time that could be used to save other lives. All right, my lord, said Ayurvati, quickly administering the medicines to Sati that would keep her fever down. This should keep her fever down for a few hours. She looked up at Parkateshwar standing at the back for an instant. Parkateshwar knew that keeping the fever down would only lengthen Sati's agony. But he shared the glimmer of hope that Shiva felt coming back towards Shiva. Ayurvedi said, "My lord, you too are injured. Let me dress your wounds and I'll leave." "I am all right," said Shiva, not taking his eyes off Sati for an instant. "No, you are not, my lord," said Ayurvedi firmly. "Your wounds are deep. If they catch an infection, then it could be life-threatening." Shiva did not answer. He just kept looking at Sati and waved his hand dismissively. "Shiva," shouted Ayurvedi. Shiva looked up at her. "You cannot help Sati if you yourself become unwell." The harsh tone had the desired effect. While Shiva did not move from his place, he let Ayurvedi dress his wounds. Ayurvedi then quickly tended to Parkateshwar's wounds and left the hut. Shiva looked at the prahar lamp in the hut. It had been 3 hours since Ayurvedi had removed the arrow. Parkateshwar had left the hut to look after the other injured and make the preparations for setting up camp, since the convoy was going to stay in for some time. That was if he was confronted with an ugly situation that he could do nothing about. He did not wallow in his misery. He would drown himself in his work so that he did not have to think about the crisis. Shiva was different. Many years back, he had sworn that he would never run away from a difficult situation. Even if there was absolutely nothing he could do. He hadn't left Sati's side for a moment. He sat patiently by her bed, waiting for her to recover. Hoping for her to recover. Praying for her to recover. Shiva _____. A barely audible whisper broke the silence. Shiva looked at Sati's face. Her eyes were slightly open. Her hand had moved indiscernibly. He pulled his chair closer, careful not to touch her. "I'm so sorry," cried Shiva. "I should never have got us into this fight." No, murmured Sati. "You did the right thing. You have come to Meluha to lead us and to destroy evil. You did your duty." Shiva continued to stare at Sati, overcome by grief. Sati widened her eyes a bit, trying to take in as much of Shiva as she could, in what she knew were her last moments. Death brings to a final end a soul's aspirations. Ironically, however, it is sometimes the hovering imminence of the end itself which gives a soul the courage to challenge every constraint and express even a long-denied dream. "It is my time to go," Shiva whispered Sati. "But before I go, I want to tell you that the last few months have been the happiest in my life." Shiva continued to look at Sati with moist eyes. His hands developed a life of their own and moved towards Sati. He checked himself in time. "I wish you had come into my life earlier," said Sati, letting out a secret that she hadn't even acknowledged to herself. "My life would have been so different." Shiva's eyes tried frantically to restrain themselves, struggling against the despair that needed an outlet. "I wish I had told you earlier," murmured Sati. "Because the first time that I am telling you will also probably be the last." Shiva continued to look at her, his voice choked. Sati looked deeply into Shiva's eyes, whispering softly, "I love you." The dam broke and tears poured down Shiva's grief-stricken face. "You are going to repeat these words for at least another 100 years," sobbed Shiva. "You are not going anywhere. I will fight the god of death himself, if I have to." "You are not going anywhere _ Sati smiled sadly and put her hand in Shiva's. Her hand was burning. The fever had begun its assault. Chapter 18 Sati and the fire arrow. "Nothing can be done, my lord," said a visibly uncomfortable Ayurvedi _ She and Shiva were standing in a corner of the hut, at what they thought was a safe distance beyond the range of Sati's ears. Parkateshwar was standing beside them, holding his tears back. "Come on," Ayurvedi urged Shiva. "You are the best doctor in the land. All we have to do is wait for the fever to break." "This fever cannot be broken," reasoned Ayurvedi _ There is no cure for the Agnibaran poison. We are only lengthening Sati's agony by keeping the fever low. The moment the medicines are stopped, the fever will recur with a vengeance. Let it go, Shiva mumbled a frail voice from the bed. Everyone turned to stare at Sati. Her face wore a smile that comes only with the acceptance of the inevitable. I have no regrets. I have told you what I needed to. I am content. My time has come, don't give up on me, Sati cried Shiva. You are not gone yet. We will find a I will find a way. Just bear with me. Sati gave up. She didn't have the strength. She also knew that Shiva had to find his own peace with her death. And he wouldn't find that unless he felt he had done everything possible to save her. I can feel my fever rising, said Sati. Please give me the medicines. Ayan, Kati glanced at Sati uncomfortably. All her medical training told her that she shouldn't do this. She knew that she was just increasing Sati's suffering by giving her medicines. Sati stared hard at Ayurvedi. She couldn't give up now. Not when Shiva had asked her to give me the medicines, Ayurvedi repeated Sati. I know what I am. Ayurvedi gave Sati the medicines. She gazed into Sati's eyes, expecting to find some traces of fear or anguish. There were none. Ayurvedi smiled gently and walked back to Shiva and Parvati. I know, exclaimed Shiva. Why don't we give her the sumras? What effect will that have, my lord? Asked a surprised Ayurvedi. The sumras only MDRKS on the oxidants and increases a person's lifespan. It doesn't on injuries. Look Ayurvedi, I don't think anyone truly understands everything about the sumras. I know you know that. What you don't know is that the sumras repaired a frostbitten toe that I had lived with all my life. It also repaired my dislocated shoulder. What? Said a visibly surprised Parvati. That's impossible. The sumras does not cure physical disabilities. It did in my case, but that could also be because you are special, my lord, said Ayurvedi. You are the Nilkanth. I didn't drop from the sky, Ayurvedi. My body is as human as Sati's. As human as yours. Let's just try it. Parvati did not need any more convincing. He dashed out to find Vraka sitting on a stool. Vraka immediately rose and saluted his commander. Vraka said, Patviteshwar. The temple may still have some sumras powder. It was the main production center of the area. I want that powder. Now. You will have it in 10 minutes. My lord. Vraka as he rushed off with his guards. There is nothing else to do but I wait, said Ayurvedi as Sati fell asleep. The sumras had been administered, a stronger dose than usual. Parvati, you are tired. You need to recover from your wounds. Please go and sleep. I don't need sleep, said Parvati stubbornly. I am staying on guard with my soldiers at the perimeter. You can't trust those Chandravanshis. They may launch a counter-attack at night. A frustrated Ayurvedi glared at Parvati. Her belief reinforced that the machismo of the Kshatriyas made them impossible patients. Are you going to bed, my lord? Asked Ayurvedi, turning towards Shiva, hoping that at least he would listen. There is nothing you can do now. We just have to wait and you need the rest. Shiva Lust shook his head. Wild horses could not drag him away from Sati. We could arrange a bed in this hut, continued Ayurvedi. You could sleep here if you wish, so that you can also keep an eye on Sati. Thank you, but I am not going to sleep, said Shiva, briefly looking at Ayurvedi before turning towards Sati. I am staying here. You go to sleep. I will call you if there is any change. Ayan, Kati glared at Shiva and then whispered, as you wish, my lord. A tired Ayurvedi walked towards her own hut. She needed to get some rest since the next day would be busy. She would have to check the wounds of all the injured to ensure that recovery was proceeding properly. The first 24 hours were crucial. Her medical corps had been divided into groups to keep a staggered, all-night vigil for any emergencies. I will be with the soldiers, Shiva said. Parvati Nandi and Veerbhadra are on duty outside along with some of my personal guards. Shiva knew what actually wanted to say. I will call you as soon as there is a change, Parvati said Shiva, looking up at the general. Parvati's smiled weakly and nodded to Shiva. He rushed out before his feelings could cause him any embarrassment. Ksata 49 Parvati's sat alone and silent, while his soldiers maintained a distance. Out of respect they knew when their lord wanted to be left alone. Parvati's was lost in thoughts of Sati. Why should a person like her be put through so much suffering by the Almighty? He remembered her childhood. The day when he decided that here was a girl he would be proud to have as his goddaughter. That fateful day, when for the first and only time, he regretted his vow to not have any progeny of his own. Foolish father would not want a child like Sati. It was a lazy afternoon more than 100 years ago. Sati had just returned from the Gurukul at the tender age of 16. Full of verve and a passionate belief in Lord Ram's teachings. Lord Brahmanayak still reigned over the land of Meluha. His son, Prince Daksha, was content being a family man, spending his days with his wife and daughter. He showed absolutely no inclination to master the warrior ways of the Kshatriya. Neither did he show the slightest ambition to succeed his father. On that day, Daksha had settled down for a family picnic on the banks of the river Sarasivatu, a short distance from Devajayari. Parvati's was then a bodyguard to Daksha and was conscientious about his duties. He sat near the prince, close enough to protect him, but far enough to give some privacy to the prince and his wife. Sati had wandered off into the forest in the distance, while remaining close to the river so that she was visible. Suddenly Sati's cry ripped through the silence. Daksha, Virini and Parvati's looked up startled. They rushed to the edge of the bank to see Sati at the river bend, ferociously battling a pack of wild dogs. She was blocking them to protect a severely injured woman. It could be seen even from the distance that the caste unmarked, fair woman was a recent immigrant, who did not know that one never approached the banks without a sword to protect oneself from wild animals. She must have been attacked by the pack, which was large enough to bring down even a charging lion. Sati, shouted Daksha in alarm. Drawing his sword, he charged down the river to protect his daughter. Parvati's followed Daksha, his sword drawn for battle. Within moments, they had jumped into the fray. Parvati's charged aggressively into the pack, easily hacking many with quick strikes. Sati, rejuvenated by the sudden support, fought back the 4 dogs charging towards her all at once. Daksha fought ferociously, despite an obvious lack of martial skills, with the passionately protective spirit that only a parent feels for his offspring. But the animals could sense that Daksha was the weakest amongst their human enemies. 6 dogs charged at him at the same time. Daksha drove his CI-73 RCL forward in a brutal jab at the dog in front of him. A mistake. Even though Daksha felled the dog, his sword was stuck in the dead animal. That was all the opening that the other dogs needed. One charged viciously from the side, seizing Daksha's right forearm in its jaws. He roared in pain, but held on to his sword as he tried to wrestle his arm free. Another dog bit Daksha's left leg, wranking some of his flesh out. Seeing his lord in trouble, Parvati's yelled in fury as he swung his sword at the body of the dog clinging to Daksha's arm, cleanly cutting the beast in half. Parvati's pirouetted around in the same smooth motion and slashed another dog charging at Daksha from the front. Sati moved in to protect Daksha's left flank as he angrily stabbed the dog that was clinging to his leg. Seeing Thiel numbers rapidly depleting, the remaining dogs retreated yelping. Daksha, sobbed Virini, as she rushed to hold up her collapsing husband. He was losing blood at an alarming rate from his numerous wounds, especially from the thigh. The dog's sharp incisor must surely have pierced a mere artery. Parvati's quickly blew his distress conch shell. A cry for help reached the scouts at the closest crossing house. Soldiers and paramedics would ire with them in a few minutes. Parvati's bound his angvastram tight around Daksha's thigh to stem the bleeding. Then he quickly helped the injured foreign woman move closer to the royal party. "Father, are you all right?" whispered Sati as she held her father's hand. "Damn it, Sati," shouted Daksha, "what do you think you were doing? Sati fell silent at the violent response from her doting father. "Who asked you to be a hero?" harangued Daksha, fuming at his daughter. "What if something had happened to you? What would I do? Where would I go? And for whom were you risking her life? Difference does the life of that woman make?" Sati continued to look down, distraught at the scolding. She had been expecting praise. The crossing house soldiers and paramedics rushed to the scene. With efficient movements, they quickly stemmed the flow of Daksha's blood. After dressing Parvati's and Sati's minor wounds rapidly, they carried Daksha on a stretcher. His wounds needed attention from the royal physician. As Sati saw her father being carried away, she stayed rooted, deeply guilty about the harm her actions had caused. She was only trying to save a woman in distress. Wasn't it one of Lord Ram's primary teachings that it is the duty of the strong to protect the weak? She felt a soft touch on her shoulder. She turned to face Captain Parvati, her father's severe bodyguard. Strangely though, his face sported a rare smile. "I am proud of you, my child," whispered Parvati. "You are a true follower of In." Tears suddenly burst forth in Sati's eyes. She looked away quickly. Taking time to control herself, she looked up with a smile at the man she would in days to come grow up to call Pitratula. She nodded softly. Jolted back into the present by a bird call, Parvati's scanned the perimeter, his eyes moist with emotion. He clutched his hands in a prayer and whispered, "She's your true follower, Lord Ram. Fight for her." Shiva had lost track of time. Obviously, nobody had been assigned to reset the prahar lamps when so many lives were still in danger. Looking out of the window, he could see early signs of dawn. Shiva's duns burned, crying for relief. But he wasn't going to give in. He sat quietly on his chair, next to Sati's bed, restraining himself from making any noise that would disturb her. Sati held his hand tightly. Despite the searing heat of her feverish body, Shiva did not move his hands away. His palms were sweaty due to the intense heat. He looked longingly at Sati and softly whispered, "Either you stay here or I leave this world with you. The choice is yours." He felt a slight itch. He looked down to see Sati's hand move ever so slightly, beads of perspiration gliding down between their entwined palms, though whose perspiration it was he could not say. "Is it Safi's or mine?" Shiva immediately reached out with his other hand towards Sati's forehead. It was bumming even more strongly. But there were soft beads of perspiration on the temple. A burst of elation shot through Shiva's being. "Ksata fought by the great Lord Brahma," whispered Ayutvati in awe. "I have never seen anything like this." She was standing beside Sati's bed. The still sleeping Sati was sweating profusely. Her bed and garments were soaked. Parvati stood by her side, his face aglow with hope. "The Agnibaran fever never breaks," continued a stunned Ayurvati. "This is a miracle." Shiva looked up, his face shimmering with the ecstasy of a soul that had salvaged its reason for existence. "May the holy lake bless the Samaras." Parvati noticed Sati's hand clutched tightly in Shiva's, but he did not comment. The bliss of this moment had finally crowded out his instinctive drive to stop something unacceptable under the laws of the land. "My lord," said Ayutvati softly. "We must bathe her quickly. The sweat must be removed. However, considering that her wounds cannot get wet, my nurses will have to rub her down." Shiva looked up at Ayutvati and nodded, not understanding the implication. "I'd said Ayutvati. That means you will have to leave the room." "Of course," said Shilpa. As he got up to leave, Ayutvati said, "My lord, your hands would need to be washed as well." Shiva looked down, noticing Sati's sweat. He looked up at Ayutvati and nodded, "I will do so immediately." "This is a miracle, Sati. Nobody has ever recovered from an Agnibaran," said Ayutvati, beaming from ear to ear. "I'll be honest. I had given up hope. It was the Lord's faith that has kept you alive." Sati was lying on her bed wearing a smile and freshly washed clothes. A new bed had been brought in with freshly laundered and sterilized linen. All traces of the toxic sweat triggered by the sumras had been removed. "Oh no," said a self-conscious Shiva. "I did nothing. It was Sati's fighting spirit that saved her." "No, Shiva. It was you." "Not me," said Sati, holding Shiva's hand without any hint of tentativeness. "You have saved me at so many levels. I don't know how I can even begin to repay you by never saying again that you have to repay me." Sati smiled even more broadly and held Shiva's hand tighter. Parvateswar looked on gloomily at both of them, unhappy with the open display of their love. "All right," said Ayurvati, clapping her hands together as if to signal the end of an episode. "Much as I would like to sit here and chit-chat with all of you, I have work to do." "What work?" asked Shiva playfully. "You are a brilliant doctor. You have an exceptional team. I know that every single injured person has been saved. There is nothing more for you to do." "Oh, there is, Mayan," said Ayurvati with a smile. "I have to put on record how the percent Mras can cure an Agnibaran wound. I will present this at the medical council as soon as I return to Devajayari. This is big news. We must research the curative properties of the sumras. There is a lot of work to do." Shiva smiled fondly at Ayurvati. Sati whispered, "Thank you Ayurkachi. Like thousands of others, I too owe my life to you. You owe me thing, Sati." "I only did my duty." Ayan, Kati bowed with a formal namaste and left the room. "Well, even I mumbled Parvateswar awkwardly, as he walked out. Parvateswar surprised to find Ayurvatal waiting for him outside. She was standing at a safe distance from the guards. Whatever it was that she wanted to talk about, she did not want the others to hear. "What is it, Ayurvati?" asked Parvateswar. "I know what's bothering you." Parvateswar said. Ayurvati "Then how can you just stand by and watch? I don't think it is right. I know that this is not the correct time to say anything, but I will raise the issue when appropriate." "No, you shouldn't." "How can you say that?" asked a shocked Patviteshwar. "You come from a rare family which did not have even one renegade Brahmin during the rebellion. Lord Ram insisted that the laws had to be followed strictly. He demonstrated repeatedly that even he wasn't above the law. Shiva is a good man. I won't deny that. But he cannot be above the law. Nobody can be above the law. Otherwise our society will collapse. You above all should know this." "I know only one thing," said Ayurvati, determined. "If the Nilkanth feels it is right, then it is right." Parvateswar looked at Ayurvati as if he didn't recognize her. This could not be the woman he knew and admired, the woman who followed the law without exception. Parvateswar had begun to respect Shiva. But the respect had not turned into unquestioning faith. He did not believe that Shiva was the one who would complete Lord Ram's work. In Parvateswar's eyes, only Lord Ram deserved absolute obedience, nobody else. "In any case," said Ayurvati, "see, I have to leave." "I have a theory to think about." "Ksata 49 really?" asked Shiva. "You mean it is not necessary in Meluha that the emperor's firstborn son succeed him?" "Yes," replied Sati smiling. Shiva and Sati had spent many hours over the previous week talking about matters important and mundane. Sati, while recovering quickly, was still bedridden. The convoy had set up camp at Kuni till such time as the injured were ready to travel. The journey to Lothal had been called off. Shiva and Parvateswar had decided that it was better to return to Devajayari as soon as the wounded were able to. Sati shifted slightly to relieve a bit of the soreness in her back. But she did not let go of Shiva's hand while doing so. Shiva leaned forward and pushed back a strand of hair that had slipped onto Sati's face. She smiled lovingly at him and continued, "You see, till around 250 years ago, the children of the kings were not his birth children. They were drawn from the Maker system. So there was no question of knowing who the first was. We could only know his first adopted Fairpoint. But in addition, it was not necessary that the first adopted child do 1D succeed. This was another one of the laws that Lord Ram instituted for stability and peace. You see, in the olden days there were many royal families, each with their own small kingdom. All right, said Shiva, paying as much attention to Sati's words as to the hypnotizing dimples that formed on her cheeks when she spoke. These kings would probably be at war all the time, so that one of them could be overlord for however short a period. Obviously, smiled Sati, shaking her head at the foolishness of the kings before Lord Ram's time. Well, it is the same everywhere, said Shiva, remembering the constant warfare in his part of the battles for supremacy amongst the kings led to many unnecessary and futile wars, where the only ones who suffered were the common people. Continued Sati. Lord Ram felt it was ridiculous for the people to suffer so that the egos of their kings were fed. He instituted a system where a Rajya Sabha, the Mlipji Council, consisting of all Brahmins and Kshatriyas of a specific rank, was created. Whenever the emperor died or took sannyas, the council would meet and elect a new emperor from amongst Kshatriyas of the rank of brigadier or above. The decision could not be contested and was inviolate. I have said it before and I'll say it again, said Shiva with a broad smile. Indram was a genius, yes, he was, said Sati, enthusiastically. Jai Shri Ram, repeated Shiva. But tell me, how come your father became the emperor after Brahmanayak? After all, His Highness is the firstborn of the previous emperor, correct? He was elected, just like every other emperor of Meluha. Actually, it was the first time in Meluhan history that a ruling emperor's son was elected emperor, said Sati proudly. But your grandfather helped your father get elected. I've never been sure about that. I know my grandfather would have liked it if my father had become emperor. But I also know that he was a great man who followed the rules of Meluha and would not openly help his son. Lord Bhrigu, a great sage respected across the land, helped my father a great deal in his election. Shiva smiled at her as he tenderly ran his hand across the side of her face. Sati closed her eyes, exulting in the sensation. His hand glided along the side of her body to rest on her hand again. He squeezed it softly. Shiva was about to ask more about the relationship between Daksha and Bhrigu when the door suddenly swung open. Daksha, looking deeply exhausted, stormed in. Following him were Virini and Kanakala. Shiva immediately withdrew his hand before Daksha could see where it was. But Daksha had noticed the movement. Father, cried a surprised Sati. Sati, my child, sighed Daksha, kneeling next to Sati's bed. Virini knelt next to Daksha and ran her hand lovingly over her daughter's face. She was crying. Kanakala remained at a distance and greeted Shiva with a formal namast. Shiva returned Kanakala's namast with a beaming smile. Parkateshwar and Ayavati waited next to Kanakala, politely leaving the royal family alone in their prolate moment. Nandi, Veerbhadra and Kritika stood behind them. A discreet aide silently brought in chairs for the royal couple, placed them next to the bed and left just as quietly. Daksha, Virin and Kanakala, accompanied by 2,000 soldiers, had immediately left Devagli on hearing the news of Sati's imperi. They had sailed down the Saraswati to the inland delta of the river and then had ridden night and day to reach Kuni. I am all right, father, said Sati, holding her mother's hand gently. Turning towards her mother, she continued, seriously, mother. I am feeling better than ever. Give me one more week and 1,311 dance for you. Shiva couldn't suppress a grin even as both Daksha and Virini smiled indulgently at Sati. Looking at her father, Sati continued, I am sorry to have caused so much trouble. I know there are many more important tasks at hand and you had to unnecessarily rush here. Trouble? Asked Daksha. My child, you are my life. You are nothing but a source of joy for me. And at this point of time, you can't imagine how proud I am of you. Virini bent over and kissed Sati's forehead tenderly. I am proud of all of you, continued Daksha, looking back at Parvateshwar and Ayavati. Proud that you supported the Lord in what had to I done. We actually fought back a terrorist attack. You can't imagine how much this has electrified the nation. Daksha soothingly continued to pat Sati's hand, as he turned to Shiva and said, "Thank you, my lord. Thank you for fighting for us. We know now that we have put our faith in the right man." Shiva could not find anything to say. He smiled awkwardly and acknowledged Daksha's faith with a slight nod and a courteous namaste. Turning to Ayavati, Daksha asked, "How is she now?" "I was told she is on her way to a total recovery." "Yes, your highness," said Ayavati. She should be able to move in another week, and in 3 weeks, the only memory of the wound would be a scar. "You are not just the best doctor of this generation," Ayavati said Daksha proudly. "You are in fact the best doctor of all time." "Oh no, your highness," cried a flabbergasted Ayavati, gently pinching her earlobes to ward off any evil spirit that might take umbrage at the undeserved compliment. "There are many far greater than me. But in this case, the miracle was Lord Neelkantha's and not mine." Looking briefly towards a visibly embarrassed Shiva before coming back to Daksha, Ayavati continued, "I thought we had lost her. She got the terrible fever after we pulled the Agnibaran out. You know that there are no medicines to cure the Agnibaran fever, your highness." But the Lord refused to lose hope. It was his idea to give her the Soms. Daksha turned to Shiva with a grateful smile and said, "I have one more thing to thank you for, my lord. My daughter is part of my soul. I wouldn't have been able to survive without her." "Oh no, I did nothing," said Shiva, self-conscious. "It was Ayavati who treated her." "Therein lies your humility, my end," said Daksha. "You truly are a worthy Neelkanth. In fact, you are a worthy Mahadev." An astounded Shiva stared at Daksha, his expression serious. He knew who the previous Mahadev, the god of gods, was. He did not believe he deserved to be compared to Lord Rudra. His deeds did not qualify him for that honor. "No, your highness. You speak too highly of me. I am no Mahadev. "Oh yes you are, my lord," said Kanakala and Ayavati almost simultaneously. Parvati looked on, silent, not wanting to press the issue as Shiva disliked hearing called Mahadev. Daksha turned towards Sati, I don't understand is why you jumped in front of the Lord to take the arrow. You have never believed in the legend. You have never had faith in the Neelkanth like I have. Why then did you risk your own life for the Lord?" Sati did not say anything. She looked down with an uncomfortable smile, embarrassed and ill at ease. Daksha turned to Shiva to see him wearing the same sheepish expression as Sati's. Virini looked at her husband intently. She waited for him to rise and speak to Shiva. Suddenly Daksha stood up and walked around the bed towards Shiva, his hands folded in a formal namaste. Surprised Shiva rose and returned Daksha's namaste, with a slight bow of his head. "My end, perhaps for the first time in her life, my daughter is tongue-tied in my presence," said Daksha. "And I have also come to understand that you will willingly give unto others but never ask for anything for yourself. Hence I must make the first move." Shiva continued to stare at Daksha, frowning. "I will not lie to you, my lord," continued Daksha. "The laws classify my daughter as a Vaikama, because she had given birth to a stillborn decades back. It is not a very serious crime. It could have been due to the past life karma of the child's father. But the law of the land holds that both the father and the mother be blamed for the tragedy. My darling daughter was put in the category of a Vaikama, because of this incident." Shiva's expression made it clear that he thought the Vaikama law unfair. "It is believed that Vaikama people are carriers of bad fate," continued Daksha. "Hence if she marries again, she will pass on her bad fate to her husband and possibly her future children." Virini at her husband's inscrutable eyes. "I know my daughter, my lord," continued Daksha. "I have never seen her do anything even remotely wrong. She is a good woman. In my opinion, the law that condemns her is unfair. But I am only the emperor. I cannot change the law." Parvati glared angrily at Daksha, upset that he served an emperor who held the law in such low esteem. It breaks my heart that I cannot give my daughter the happy life that she deserves, sobbed Daksha. That I cannot save her from the humiliation that a good soul like her suffers daily. What I can do, though, is ask you for help. Sati looked at her father with loving eyes. You are the Neelkanth, continued Daksha. In fact you are more than that. I genuinely believe that you are a Mahadev, even though I know you don't like to be called one. You are above the law. You can change the law if you wish. You can override it if you want. An aghast Parvateshwar glowered at Daksha. How could the emperor be so dismissive of the law? Then his eyes fell on Shiva. His heart sank further. Shiva was staring at Daksha with undisguised delight. He had thought that he would have to convince the emperor about Sati. But here he was, quite sure that the emperor was about to offer his daughter's hand to him. If you decide to take my daughter's hand, my lord, no power on earth can stop you, contended Daksha. The question is, do you want to? All the emotions in the universe surged through Shiva's being. His face wore an ecstatic smile. He tried to speak but his voice was choked. He bent down, picked up Sati's hand gently, brought it to his lips and kissed it lovingly. He looked up at Daksha and whispered, I will never let go of her. Never. A stunned Sati stared at Shiva. She had dared to love over the last week, but had not dared to hope. And now her wildest dream was coming true. She was going to be his wife. An overjoyed Daksha hugged Shiva tightly and said softly, my lord. Virini was sobbing uncontrollably. The spectre of a lifetime's injustice had been lifted off Sati. She looked up at Daksha, almost willing to forgive him. Ayavati and Kanakala stepped up and congratulated the emperor, the queen, Shiva and Sati. Nandi, Kritika and Veerbhadra, who had heard the entire conversation, expressed their joy. Patviteshwar stood rooted near the door, furious with such disregard for Lord Ramsway_Shiva, at long last, regained control of himself, firmly gapping Sati's hand. He looked at Daksha, but your highness, I have a condition. Yes, my lord. The Vaikama law __it doesn't need to be changed, Mayand, said Daksha. If you decide to marry my daughter, then the law cannot stop you. All the same, said Shiva. That law must be changed. Of course, it will be, my lord, said a beaming Daksha. Turning towards Kanakala, he continued, make a proclamation to be signed by the Neelkanth, saying that from now on any noble woman who gives birth to a stillborn child will not be classified as Vaikama_no, your highness, interrupted Shiva. That is not what I meant. I want the entire Vaikama law scrapped. Nobody will be a Vaikama from now on. Bad fate can strike anyone. It is ridiculous to blame the past lives for it. Parvateshwar looked at Shiva in surprise. Though he did not like even a comma being changed ere many of Lord Ram's laws, he appreciated that Shiva was remaining true to a fundamental canon of Lord Ram's principles. The same law applies to everybody, equally and fairly, without exceptions. Daksha, however, looked at Shiva in shock. This was unexpected. Like all Meluhans, he too was superstitious about the Vaikama_. His displeasure was not with the Vaikama law itself but with his daughter being classified as one. But he quickly recovered and said, of course, my lord. The proclamation will state that the entire Vaikama law has been scrapped. Once you sign it, it will become law. Thank you, your highness, smiled Shiva. My daughter's happy days are back, exulted Daksha, turning to Kanakala_. I want a grand ceremony at Devajayari when we return. A wedding the likes of which the world has not seen before. The most magnificent wedding ever. Call in the erst organizers in the land. I want no expense spared. Daksha turned to look at Shiva for affirmation. Shiva looked at Sati to admire her joyous smile and glorious dimples. Turning towards Daksha, he said, all I want, your highness, is to get married to Sati. I wouldn't mind the simplest ceremony in the world or the most magnificent so long as all of you, Brahaspati and the Gunas, are present. I will be happy. Excellent, rejoiced Daksha. Chapter 19 Love realized there was an air of celebration in Devagiri when the royal caravan arrived 3 weeks later. Kanakala, who had arrived in Devagiri earlier, ensured that all the preparations for the most eagerly wedding in a millennium had been accomplished. Her arrangements, as always, had been impeccable. The various wedding ceremonies and celebrations had been spread over 7 days, each day filled with an exuberant variety of events. By the usually sober Surivanshi standards, the city had been decorated extravagantly. Colorful banners hung proudly from the city walls, splashing festive beauty on the sober grey exteriors. The roads had been freshly tiled in the sacred blue color. All the restaurants and shops served their customers free of charge for the 7 days of revelry, subsidized at state expense. The buildings had been freshly painted at government cost to make Devagiri appear like a city that had been established the previous day. A massive channel had been rapidly dug along the far side of the Saraswati where a part of the river had been diverted. The channel was in the open in some parts and went underground in others. Filters injected a red dye into the water as soon as it entered the channel and removed it just as efficiently when the water flowed back into the river. The channel formed a giant swastika, an ancient symbol which literally translates into that which is associated with well-being, or very simply, a lucky charm. From any of the 3 city platforms, a Meluhan could look in reverence at the enormous impression of the revered swastika in the royal red Surivanshi color formed by the flow of the holy Sarasvati. Some of the protective giant spikes around the entry drawbridges of the 3 platforms had been cleared. In their stead, giant rangalis, visible from miles away, had been drawn to welcome all into the capital. Kanakala had wanted to clear all the spikes surrounding Devagiri, but Parvateshwar had vetoed it, citing security reasons. Elite families from across the empire had been invited to attend the festivities. People of distinction ranging from government doctors to scientists, generals to artists and even sannyasis had trooped into Devagiri to celebrate the momentous occasion. Ambassadors of eminent countries, such as Mesopotamia and Egypt, had been given permits for a rare visit to the capital of Meluha. Jules Hua had cannily used the distinctive honor granted to ambassadors to wrangle some additional trade quotas. Brahaspati had come down from Mount Manda with his retinue. Only a skeletal security staff of Arishtani soldiers had been left behind at the mountain. It was the first time in history that 7 days would elapse at Mount Manda without any experiments. The first day had 2 pujas organized in the name of Lord Indra and Lord Agni. They were the main gods of the people of India, and their blessings were sought before any significant event, and an event as momentous as the wedding of the millennium could only begin with their sanction. This particular puja, however, celebrated the warrior form. Daksha eloquently explained the reason. The Meluhans were not just celebrating the marriage between the Nilkanth and their princess. They were also celebrating the massive defeat of the despised terrorists at Kuni. According to him, the echoes of Kuni would reverberate deep in the heart of Swadweep. The Surivanshi vengeance had begun. This puja was followed by the formal marriage ceremonies of Shiva and Sati. After which, though some of the celebrations were still on, Shiva excused himself and tugged Sati along with him. By the holy lake, exclaimed Shiva, shutting the door to their private chamber behind him. This is only the first day. Is every day going to be as long? It doesn't seem to make a difference to you. You walked out when you pretty well pleased, teased Sati. I don't care about those damned ceremonies, growled Shiva, ripping his ceremonial turban off and flinging it aside. He stared at Sati fervently, slowly moving towards her, his breathing heavy. Oh yes, of course, mocked Sati, with a playfully theatrical expression. The Nilkanth gets to decide what is important and what is not. The Nilkanth can do anything he wants. Oh yes, he can. Sati laughed mischievously and ran to the other side of the bed. Shiva dashed towards her from the opposite side as he hurled his Angvastramath in one smooth motion. Oh yes, he can. Remember what I've told you to say, whispered Nandi to Veerbhadra. Don't worry. The Lord will give his permission. What whispered a groggy Shiva as he was woken up gently by Sati. Wake up, Shiva whispered Sati tenderly, her hair falling over his face, teasing his cheeks. Careful now, murmured Sati softly, as Shiva looked at her longingly. Nandi, Kritika and Veerbhadra are waiting at the door. They have something important to say to Pu_hum, growled Shiva, as he walked towards the door and glared at the trio. What is it, Nandi? Isn't there someone beautiful in your life that you would like to bother at this hour instead of troubling me? There's nobody like you, my lord, said Nandi, with a low bow and a chaste namaste. Nandi, you better stop this nonsense or you are going to remain a bachelor all your life, joked Shiva. As everybody laughed loudly, Klitilka remained anxious about the task at hand. Well, what did you want to talk about? Asked Shiva. Nandi nudged Veerbhadra roughly. Shiva turned to Veerbhadra with a quizzical Bhadra, since when do you need the support of so many people to speak to me? Asked Shiva. Shiva murmured Veerbhadra nervously. Is like this is like what? Well, you see. I am seeing Bhadra. Shiva, please stop making him more nervous than he already is, said Sati. Looking towards Veerbhadra, she continued, Veerbhadra, speak fearlessly. You haven't done anything wrong. Shiva whispered Veerbhadra timidly, his cheeks the color of beetroot. I need your permission granted, said Shiva, amused by now. Whatever it is that you want it for. Actually, I am considering getting married. A capital idea, said Shiva. Now all you have to do is convince some blind woman to marry you. Shiva, reprimanded Sati gently. Well, I've already found a woman, said Veerbhadra, before his courage could desert him, and she's not blind. Not blind, exclaimed Shiva, his eyebrows humorously arched in wide disbelief. Then she is stupid enough to tie herself for the next 7 births to a man who wants someone else to determine his marriage. Veerbhadra gazed at Shiva with an odd mixture of embarrassment, contrition and miscomprehension. I've said this to you earlier, Bhadra, said Shiva, there are many customs of our tribe that I don't like. And one of the primary ones amongst them is that the leader has to approve the bride of any tribesman. Don't you remember how we made fun of this ridiculous tradition as children? Veerbhadra glanced at Shiva and immediately down again, still unsure. For God's sake, man, if you are happy with her, then I am happy for you, said an exasperated Shiva. You have my permission. Veerbhadra looked up in surprised ecstasy as Nandi nudged him again. Kritika looked at Veerbhadra, as a long-held breath escaped with massive relief. She turned to Sati and silently mouthed the words, thank you. Shiva walked towards Kritika and hugged her warmly. A startled Kritika held back for an instant, before the warmth of the Nilkanth conquered her. Even she reset _ she returned the embrace. Welcome to the tribe, whispered Shiva. We are quite mad, but at heart we are good people. But how did you know, said Veerbhadra _ I never told you that I loved her. I am not blind, Bhadra, smiled Shiva. Thank you, said Kritika to Shilpa. Thank you for accepting me. Shiva stepped back and said, no. Thank you. I was always concerned about Bhadra. He is a good, dependable man, but too simple-minded about women. I was worried about how married life would treat him. But there is no reason to worry anymore. Well, I too want to tell you something, said Kritika _ I had never believed in the legend of the Nilkanth _ but if you can transform Meluha like you have transformed my lady, then you are worthy of even being called the Mahadev. I don't want to be called the Mahadev, Kritika _ you know I love Meluha as much as I love Sati. I will do all that I possibly can. Turning towards Veerbhadra, Shiva ordered, come here, you stupid offal. Veerbhadra came forward, embraced Shiva affectionately and whispered, thank you. Don't I a stupid? There's no need for a thank you, said Shiva with a grin. Veerbhadra smiled broadly. And listen, snarled Shiva Mokanga. You are going to answer to your best friend over the next chillum we share on how you dared to love a woman for so long without even speaking to me about it. Everybody laughed out loud. Will a good batch of Meluhana make up for it? Asked Veerbhadra, smiling. Well, I'll think about it. Doesn't she look tired? Asked a concerned Ayavati, looking at Sati. Sati had just gotten up from the prayer platform as she and her mother had been excused for this particular ceremony. This was only for the bridegroom and the father of the bride. The pandits were preparing for the puja, which would take a few moments. Well, it has been 6 days of almost continuous celebrations and pujas, said Kanakala. Though it is the custom that all this be done for a royal wedding, I can understand her being tired. Oh, I wouldn't say it has anything to do with the 6 dgys of pujas, said Brahaspati_no, asked Kanakala_no, answered Brahaspati, mischievously. I think it has to do with the 5 nights. What? Exclaimed Ayavati, then blushed a deep red as the meaning of Brahaspati's M3RCLS dawned on her. Parvateshwar, who was sitting next to Kanakala, glared at Brahaspati for the highly improper remark. Brahaspati guffawed as the ladies giggled quietly. An assistant pandit turned around in irritation. But on seeing the seniority of the Brahmins sitting behind him, he immediately swallowed his annoyance and returned to his preparations. Parvateshwar, however, had no such compunctions. I can't believe the kind of conversation I am being forced to endure. He rose to walk to the back of the congregation. This made even Kanakala and Ayanrati chortle. One of the senior pandits tummed to signal that the ceremony was about to begin, making them fall silent. Immediately the pandits resumed the invocations of the shlokas. Both Shiva and Daksha continued to pour the ceremonial ghee into the sacred fire at regular intervals while saying swaha in between successive swahas. There was enough time for Shiva and Daksha to talk softly to each other. They spoke of Sati. And only Sati. To any neutral observer, it would have been difficult to decide who loved the princess more. The pandit took a momentary break in his recitation of the shlokas, the cue for Shiva and Daksha to pour some more ghee into the sacred fire with a swaha. A little ghee spilled onto Daksha's hands. As Shiva immediately pulled the napkin on his side to wipe it off, he noticed the chosen tribe amulet on Daksha's arm. He was stunned on seeing the animal there, but had the good sense to not comment. Daksha meanwhile had also tummed and noticed Shiva's gaze. It wasn't my choice. My father chose it for me, said Daksha, with a warm smile, while wiping the ghee off his hands. There was not a hint of embarrassment in his voice. If one looked closely though, one could see just a hint of defiance in his eyes. Oh no, Your Highness, mumbled Shiva, a little mortified. I didn't mean to look. Please accept my apologies. Why should you apologize, my Ind? Asked Daksha. It is my chosen tribe. It is on the arm so that everyone can see it and classify me. But you are far beyond your chosen tribe, Your Highness, said Shiva. PDIITE1Y_, you are a much greater man than what that amulet symbolizes. Yes, smiled Daksha. I really showed the old man, didn't I? The Nilkanth did not choose to appear in his reign. He came in mine. The terrorists were not defeated in his reign. They were defeated in mine. And the Chandravanshis were not reformed in his reign. They will be reformed in mine. Shiva smiled cautiously. Something about the conversation niggled at him. He stole one more glance at the amulet on Daksha's arm. It represented a humble goat, one of the lowest chosen tribes amongst the Kshatriyas. In fact, some people considered the goat-chosen tribe to be so low that its wearer could not even be called a full Kshatriya. Shiva tummed back towards the sacred fire on receiving the verbal cue from the pandit. Scooping some more ghee, he poured it into the fire with a swaha. At nightfall, in the privacy of their chambers, Shiva had considered asking Sati about the relationship between Emperor Brahmanayak and his son, Daksha. but for some reason, his instincts told him that he would have to be careful in how he asks the questions. How was the relationship between Lord Brahmanayak and your father? Sati stopped playing with Shiva's flowing locks. She took a deep breath and whispered, it was strained at times. They were very different characters. But in Bhrigu__ the conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. What is it? Growled Shiva. Ali Lord Taman, the doorkeeper, announced nervously. The chief scientist Brahaspati has requested an audience with you. He insists that he must meet with you tonight. Shiva was always happy to meet Brahaspati_, but before answering the doorkeeper, he looked at Sati with a raised eyebrow. Sati smiled and nodded. She was aware that Shiva placed great value upon his relationship with Brahaspati. Let Brahaspati in, Taman. Yes, my lord. My friend, said Brahaspati. My apologies for disturbing you so late. You never need to apologize to me, my friend, answered Shiva. Namast, Brahaspati, said Sati, bending to touch the chief scientist's feet. Akand Sorbijavati Bhav, said Brahaspati, blessing Sati with the traditional invocation that may her husband always be AIIF and by her side. Well, said Shiva to Brahaspati, it is so important that you had to pull yourself out of bed so late in the night. Actually, I didn't get the chance to speak to you earlier. I know, said Shiva, smiling towards Sati. Our days have been full with one ceremony after another. I know, said Brahaspati, nodding. We Surivanshis love ceremonies. In any case, I wanted to come and speak with you personally, since I have to leave for Mount Manda tomorrow. What? Asked a surprised Shiva. You have survived all this for the last 6 days, surely you can survive one more. I know, said Brahaspati, crinkling his eyes apologetically. I would have loved to stay, but there is an experiment that had already been scheduled. The preparations have been going on for months. The Mesopotamian material required for it has already been prepared. We are going to test the stability of the somas with lesser quantities of water. I have to go early and ensure that the experiment begins correctly. My fellow scientists will remain here to keep you company. Right, said Shiva sarcastically. See, I really do love their constant theorizing about everything under the sun. Brahaspati laughed. I really do have to go, Shiva. I am sorry. No need to apologize, my friend, said Shiva, smiling. Life is long and the road to Mount Manda short. You are not going to get rid of me that easily. Brahaspati smiled, his eyes full of love for a man he had begun to consider his brother. He stepped forward and hugged Shiva tightly. Shiva was a little surprised. It usually Shiva who would move to embrace Brahaspati first, and Brahaspati would normally respond later, a little tentatively. My brother, whispered Brahaspati. Ditto, mumbled Shiva. Stepping slightly back but still holding Shiva's arms, Brahaspati said, I would go anywhere for you, even into Patalok if it would help you. I would never take you there, my friend, answered Shiva with a grin, thinking that he himself wasn't about to venture into Patalok, the land of the demo. Brahaspati smiled warmly at Shiva. See, I hope to see you soon, Shiva. You can count on it. Turning to Sati, Brahaspati said, take care, my child. It is so good to see you finally get the life you deserve. Thank you. Brahaspati Chapter 20 Attack on Manda. How are you, my friend? What the hell am I doing here? Asked a startled Shiva. He found himself sitting in the Brahma temple in Menks. Sitting in front of him was the Pandit whom he had met during his first visit to Meru, many months back. You called me here, said the Pandit, smiling. But how and when did I get here? Asked Shiva, astounded. As soon as you went to sleep, replied the Pandit. This is a dream. I'll be damned. Why do you swear so much? Asked the Pandit, frowning. I only swear when the occasion demands, grinned Shiva. And what's wrong with sweating? Well, I think it reflects poor manners. It shows, perhaps, a slight deficiency in character. On the contrary, I think it shows tremendous character. It shows that you have the strength and passion to speak your mind. The Pandit guffawed, shaking his head slightly. In any case, continued Shiva. Now that you are here, why don't you tell me what you people are called? I was promised I would be told the next time I met one of you, but you haven't met one of us again. This is a dream. I can only tell you what you already know, said the Pandit, smiling mysteriously. Or something that already exists in your consciousness that you haven't chosen to listen to as yet. So that's what this is all about. You are here to help me discover something I already know. Yes, said the Pandit, his smile grown more enigmatic. Well, what is it that we are supposed to talk about? The color of that leaf, beamed the Pandit, pointing towards the many trees that could be seen from the temple, through its ostentatiously carved pillars. The color of that leaf. Yes. Frowning strongly, Shiva sighed. Why, in the name of the holy lake, is the color of that leaf important? Many times a good conversational journey to find knowledge makes attaining it that much more satisfying, said the Pandit. And more importantly, it helps you understand the context of the knowledge much more easily. Context of the knowledge. Yes. All knowledge has its context. Unless you know the context, you may not understand the point, and I'll know all that by talking about the color of that leaf. Yes. By the holy lake, man, groaned Shiva. Let's talk about the leaf then. All right, laughed the Pandit. Tell me. What is the color of that leaf? The color? It's green. Isn't it? Why do you think it appears green to you? Because, said Shiva, amused, it is green. No, that wasn't what I was trying to ask. You had a conversation with one of Brahaspati's scientists about how the eye see. Didn't you? Oh, that, right, said Shiva, slapping his forehead. Light falls on an object. And when it reflects back from that object to your eyes, you see that object exactly. And you had another conversation with another scientist about what normal white sunlight is made of. Yes, I did. White light is nothing but the confluence of 7 different colors. That is why the rainbow is made up of 7 colors, since it is formed when raindrops disperse sunlight. Correct. Now put these Avo theories together and answer my question. Why does that leaf appear green to you? Shiva frowned as his mind mdrk'd the problem out. White sunlight falls on that leaf. The leaf's physical properties are such that it absorbs the colors violet, indigo, blue, yellow, orange and red. It doesn't absorb the color green, which is then reflected back to my eyes. Hence I see the leaf as green. Exactly, beamed the Pandit. So think about the color of that leaf from the perspective of the leaf itself, what color it absorbs and what it rejects. Is its color green? Or is it every single color in the world, except green? Shiva was stunned into silence by the simplicity of the argument being presented to him. There are many realities. There are many versions of what may appear obvious, continued the Pandit. Whatever appears as the unshakable truth, its exact opposite may also be true in another context. After all, one's reality is but viewed through Vanus PNSMS of context. Shiva tummed slowly towards the leaf again. Its lustrous green color shone through in the glorious sun. Are your eyes capable of seeing another reality? Asked the Pandit. Shiva continued to stare at the leaf as it gradually altered its appearance. The color seemed to be dissolving out of the leaf as its bright green hue gradually grew lighter and lighter. It slowly reduced itself to a shade of gray. As a stunned Shiva continued to stare, even the gray seemed to dissolve slowly, till the leaf was almost transparent. Only its outline could be discerned. It appeared as though numerous curved lines of avo colors, black and white, were moving in and out of the outline of the leaf. It almost seemed as if the leaf was nothing but a carrier, which the black and white curved lines used as a temporary stop on their ephemeral journey. It took some time for Shiva to realize that the surrounding leaves had also been transformed into their outlines. As his eyes panned, he noticed that the entire tree had magically transformed into an outline, with the black and white curved lines flowing in and out, easily and smoothly. He thumbed his head to soak in the panorama. Every object, from the squirrels on the trees to the pillars of the temple had all been transformed into outlines of their apparent selves. The same black and white curved lines streamed in and out of them. Coming to the pandit for an explanation, he was stunned to see that the priest himself was also transformed into an outline of his former self. White curved lines were flooding out of him with frightening intensity. Strangely though, there were no black lines around him. What the? Shiva's words were stopped by the outline of the pandit pointing back at him. Look at yourself, my Karmasarthi advised the pandit. Shiva looked down. I'll be damned. His body TCH3 had been transformed into an outline, completely transparent inside. Torrents of black curved lines were gushing furiously into him. On close examination he could see that they were not lines at all. They were, in fact, tiny waves which were jet black in color. The waves were so tiny that from even a slight distance, they appeared like lines. There wasn't even a hint of the white waves close to Shiva's outlined body. What the hell is going on? The white waves are positive energy and the black are negative, said the pandi's outline. They are both important. Their balance crucial. It will be cataclysmic if they fall out of sync. Shiva looked up at the pandit, puzzled. So why is there no positive energy around me? And no negative energy around you? Because we balance each other. The Vishnu's role is to transmit positive energy, said the pandit. The white lines pouring feverishly out of the pandit seemed to flutter a bit whenever he spoke. And the Mahadev's role is to absorb the negative. Search for it, search for negative energy and you will fulfill your destiny as a Mahadev_. But I am no Mahadev_. My deeds till now are not deserving of that title. It doesn't work that way, my friend. The title isn't at all the result of one's deeds. Deeds, however noble, will follow the rightful belief in you that you are the Mahadev_. It matters little what others think. Believe you are the Mahadev, and you will become one. Shiva frowned. Believe, repeated the pandit. Boom. A distant reverberation echoed through the ambience. Shiva turned his eyes towards the horizon. It sounds like an explosion, whispered the pandit's outline. The distant, insistent voice of Sati came riding in. SHIVA_. Boom. Another explosion. SHIVA__. It looks like your wife needs you, my friend. Shiva looked with astonishment at the outline of the pandit, unable to decipher where the sound came from. Maybe you should wake up, advised the pandi's disembodied voice. SHIVA. A groggy Shiva woke up to find Sati staring at him with concern. He was still a little bleary from the outlandishly strange dream state that he had last been yanked out of. Shiva. Boom. What the hell was that? Cried Shiva, alert now. Someone is using Devyastras. What? What are Devyastras? A clearly stunned Sati spoke agitatedly. Be weapons. But Lord Rudra had destroyed all the Devyastras. Nobody has access to them anymore. Shiva was completely alert by now, his battle instincts primed. Sati, get ready, wear your armor. Bind your weapons. Sati responded swiftly. Shiva slipped on his armor, coupled his shield to it and tied his sword to his waist. He slipped on his quiver smoothly and picked up his bow. Noting that Sati was ready, he kicked the door open. Taman and 8 other guards had their swords drawn, ready to defend their Neelkanth against any attack. My lord, you should wait inside, said Taman. We will hold the attackers here. Shiva stared hard at Taman, frowned at his well-intentioned words. Taman immediately stepped aside. I am sorry, my lord. We will follow you. Before Shiva could react, they heard footsteps rushing in towards them in the hallway. Shiva immediately drew his sword. He strained his ears to assess the threat. 4 footsteps. Just 2 men to attack a royal hall. This did make sense. 1 pair of footsteps dragged slightly. The terrorist was clearly a large man using considerable willpower to make his feet move faster than his girth allowed. "Stand down," soldiers ordered Shiva suddenly. "They are friends." Nandi and Veerbhadra emerged around the comer, running hard, with their swords at the ready. "Are you all right, my lord?" asked Nandi, admirably not out of breath. "Yes. We are all safe." "Did the two of you face any attacks?" "No," answered Veerbhadra, frowning. "That the hell is going on?" "I don't know," said Shiva. "But we're going to find out." "Where's Kritika?" asked Sati. "Safe in her room," answered Veerbhadra. "There are 5 soldiers with her. The room is barred from the inside." Sati nodded, before turning to Shiva. "What now?" "I want to check on the Emperor first. Everybody, files of Avo keep your shields up for cover. Sati at my side. Nandi in the middle. Taman, Veerbhadra, at the rear. Don't light any torches. We know the way. Our enemies don't." The plate centimeter moved with considerable speed and stealth, mindful of possible surprise attacks from the terrorists. Shiva was troubled by what he had heard. Or rather, what he had, and apart from the repeated explosions, there was absolutely no other sound from the palace. No screams of terror. No sound of panicked footsteps. No clash of steel. Nothing. Either the terrorists had not begun their real attack as yet, or Shiva was late and the attack was already over. Shiva frowned as a third alternative occurred to him. Maybe there were no terrorists in the palace itself. Maybe the attack was being mounted from a distance, with the Devyastras that Sati spoke of. Shiva's platoon reached Daksha's chambers to find his guards at the door, tense and ready for battle. "Where is the Emperor?" asked Shiva. "He is inside, my lord," said the royal guard captain, recognizing the Nilkantha's silhouette immediately. "Where are they, my lord?" "We've been waiting for an attack ever since we heard the first explosion." "I don't know," Captain replied Shiva. "Stay here and block the doorway. Taman, support the captain here with your men. And remain alert." Shiva opened the Emperor's door. "Your Highness." "My lord." "Is Sati all right?" asked Daksha. "Yes, she is, Your Highness," said Shiva, as Sati, Nandi and Veerbhadra followed him into the chamber. "And the Queen?" "Shaken. But not too scared." "What was that?" "I don't know," answered Daksha. "I would suggest that you and Sati stay here for now till we know what's going on." "Perhaps it may be advisable for you to stay here, Your Highness. We cannot risk any harm coming your way. I am going out to help Parvateshwar. If this is a terrorist attack, we need all the strength we have." "You don't have to go, my lord. This is Devajayari. Our soldiers will slay all the terrorists dim-witted enough to attack our capital." Before Shiva could respond, there was a loud insistent knocking on the door. "Your Highness. Request permission to enter." "Pawahashspur," thought Daksha. Observing to call even at a time like this. "Come in," growled Daksha. As Parvateshwar entered, Daksha let fly. "How in Lord Indra's name can this happen, General? An attack on Delraj Rai? How dare they?" "Your Highness," intercepted Shiva. Sati, Nandi and Veerbhadra were in the chambers. He could not allow Parvateshwar to be insulted in their presence, least of all in Sati's. "Let us first find out what is going on." "The attack is not on Devagli, Your Highness," glared Parvateshwar, his impatience with his emperor having put him on edge. "My scouts saw massive plumes of smoke coming from the direction of Mount Manda. I believe it is under attack. I have already given orders for my troops and the station Arishtani to be ready. We leave in an hour. I need your permission to depart." "The explosions were in Manda, Pitratulya?" asked Sati incredulously. "How must they have been to be heard?" Devagli. Parvateshwar looked gloomily at Sati, his silence conveying his deepest fears. He turned towards Daksha. "Your Highness." Daksha seemed stunned into silence. Or was that a frown on his forehead? Parvateshwar could not be sure in the dim light. Guards, light the torches, ordered Parvateshwar. There is no attack on Devajin. As the torches spread their radiance, Parvateshwar repeated, "Do I have your permission, my lord?" Daksha nodded softly. Parvateshwar turned to see Shiva looking shocked. "What happened, Shiva?" "Brahaspati left for Mount Manda yesterday." "What?" asked a startled Parvateshwar, who had not noticed the chief scientist's absence in the celebrations of the previous day. "O Lord Agni." Shiva turned slowly towards Sati, drawing strength from her presence. "I will find him," Shiva consoled Parvateshwar. "I am sure he is alive." "I will find him." "I'm coming with you," said Shiva. "And so am I," said Sati. "What?" asked Daksha, the light making his agonized expression clear. "You both don't need to go." Shiva turned to Daksha, frowning. "My apologies, Your Highness. But I must go. Brahaspati needs me." As Parvateshwar and Shiva turned to leave the royal chambers, Sati bent down to touch her father's feet. Daksha seemed too dazed to bless her, and Sati did not want to remain too far behind her husband. She quickly turned to touch her mother's feet. "For Ashmanbag," said Viren. Sati frowned at the odd blessing. "I'll live long." She was going into a battle. She wanted victory, not a long life. But there was little time to argue. Sati turned and raced behind Shiva as Nandi and Veerbhadra followed closely. Chapter 21 Preparation for War. The noise of the explosions stopped within an hour of the first. It wasn't much later that Shiva, Parvateshwar, Sati, Nandi and Veerbhadra, accompanied by a brigade of 1,500 cavalry, were on their way to Mount Manda. Brahaspati's scientists rode with the brigade, sick with worry about their leader's fate. They rode hard and hoped to cover the day-long distance to the mountain in fewer than 8 hours. It almost at the end of the second prahar, with the sun directly overhead, that the brigade turned the last comer of the road where the forest cover cleared to give them their first glimpse of the mountain. An angry roar rent the air as the soldiers sighted what admittedly had been the heart of their empire. Manda had been ruthlessly destroyed. The mountain had a colossal crater at its center. It almost as if a giant asura had struck his massive hands right through the core of the mountain and scooped it out. The enormous buildings of science were in ruins, their remnants scattered across the plains below. The giant churnas at the bottom of the mountain were still functioning, their eerie sound making the gruesome picture even more macabre. "Brahaspati," roared Shiva, as he rode hard, right into the heart of the mountain, where miraculously the pathway still stood strong. "Wait," Shiva called out. Parvateshwar. "It could be a trap." Shiva, unmindful of any danger, continued to gallop up the pathway through the devastated heart of the mountain. The brigade, with Parvateshwar and Sati in the lead, rode fast, trying to keep up with Thiel-Neelkanth. They reached the top to be horrified by what they saw. Parts of the buildings hung limply on broken foundations, some structures still smoldering. Scorched and unrecognizable body parts, ripped apart by the repeated explosions, were strewn all over. It was impossible to even identify the dead. Shiva tumbled off his horse, his face devoid of even a ray of hope. Nobody could have survived such a lethal attack. Brahaspati "How did the terrorists get their hands on the Devyastras?" asked an agitated Parvateshwar, the fire of vengeance blazing within him. The soldiers had been ordered to collect all the body parts and cremate them in separate pyres, to help the departed on the onward journey. A manifest was being drawn up of the names of those believed dead. The first name on the list was that of Brahaspati, chief scientist of Meluha, Sarayapari Brahmin, Swan-chosen tribe. The others were mostly Arishthanemi, assigned to the task of protecting Mandan. It was a small consolation that the casualties were minimal, since most of the mountain's residents were Mdelrajrai for the Neelkantha's marriage. The list was going to be sent to the great Sannyasis in Kashmir, whose powers over the spiritual force were considered second to none. If the Sannyasis could be cajoled into reciting prayers for these departed souls, then it could be hoped that their grisly death in this birth would not mar their subsequent births. It could have also been the Sumras, General, said Panini, one of Brihaspati's assistant chief scientists, offering another plausible explanation. Shiva looked up suddenly on hearing Panini's words. The Sumras did this. How? Asked a disbelieving Sati. The Soms is very unstable during its manufacturing process, continued Panini. It is kept stable by using copious quantities of the Saraswati waters. One of our main projects was to determine whether we could stabilize the Sumras while using less water. Much lesser than at present. Shiva remembered Brihaspati talking about this. He leaned over to listen intently to Panini. It was one of the dream projects of Panini found it hard to complete the statement. The thought that Brihaspati, the greatest scientist of his generation, the father figure to all the learned men at Mount Manda, was gone, was too much for Panini to bear. He was choked by the intense pain he felt inside. He stopped talking, shut his eyes and hoped the terrible moment would pass. Regaining a semblance of control over himself, he continued, it was one of Brihaspati's dream projects. He had come back to organize the experiment that was to begin today. He didn't want us to miss the last day of the celebrations. So he came alone. Parvati's was numb. You mean this could have been an accident? Yes, replied Panini. We were all aware that the experiment was risky. Maybe that is why Brihaspati too decided to begin without us. The entire room stunned into silence by this unexpected information. Panini retreated into his private hell. Parvati's continued to gaze into the distance, shocked by the tum of events. Sati stared at Shiva, holding his hand, deeply worried about how her husband was taking the death of his friend. And that it may all have been just a senseless mishap. It was late into the first hour of the fourth prahar. It had been decided that the brigade would set up camp at the base of the ruined mountain. They would leave the following day, after all the ceremonies for the departed had been completed. 2 riders had been dispatched to Devagiri with the news about Manda. Parvati's and Sati sat at the edge of the mountain peak, whispering to each other. The drone of Brahmin scientists reciting Sanskrit shlokas at the base of the mountain floated up to create an ethereal atmosphere of pathos. Nandi and Veerbhadra stood at attention, a polite distance from Parvati's and Sati, looking at their Lord. Shiva was around the ruins of the Manda buildings, lost in thought. It was tearing him apart that he hadn't seen any recognizable part of Brihaspati. Everybody in Manda had been mutilated beyond recognition. He desperately searched for some sign of his friend. Something he could keep with himself. Something he could cling on to, which would soothe his tortured soul in the years of maiming that he would go through. He walked at a snail's pace, his eyes combing the ground. They suddenly fell upon an object he recognized only too well. He slowly bent down to pick it up. It was a bracelet made of leather, bumped at the edges, its back hold destroyed. The heat of the fiery explosions had scorched its brown color to black at most places. The center, however, with an embroidered design, was astonishingly unblemished. Shiva brought it close to his eyes. The crimson hue of the setting sun caused the arm symbol to glow. At the amalgam of the top and bottom curve of the arm were 2 serpent heads. The third curve, surging out to the east, ended in a sharp serpent head, with its forked tongue striking out threateningly. It was him. He killed Brihaspati. Shiva swung around, eyes desperately scanning the limbs scattered about, hoping to find the owner of the bracelet or some part of him, but there was nothing. Shiva screamed silently. A scream audible only to him and Brihaspati's wounded soul. He clutched the bracelet in his fist till its still burning embers bumped into his palms. Clasping it even more firmly, he swore a terrible vengeance. He vowed to bring upon the Naga a death that would scar him for his next 7 births. That Naga, and his entire army of vice, would be annihilated. Piece by bloody piece. Shiver. Shiver. The insistent call yanked him back to reality. Sati was standing in front of him, gently touching his hand. Parvati stood next to her, disturbed. Nandi and Veerbhadra stood to the other side. Let it go, Shiva, said Sati. Shiva continued to stare at her. Blank. Let it go, Shiva, repeated Sati softly. It's singeing your hand. Shiva opened his palm. Nandi immediately lunged forward to pull the bracelet out, screaming in surprised agony. Nandi dropped the bracelet as it scalded his hand. How did the Lord hold it for so long? Shiva immediately bent down and picked up the bracelet. This time carefully. His fingers were holding the less charred edge, the part with the arm symbol. He tummed to Parvati. It not an accident? What? Cried a startled Parvati. Are you sure? Asked Sati. Shiva towards Sati and raised the bracelet, the serpent arm clearly coming into view. Sati let out a gasp of shock. Parvati. Nandi and Veerbhadra immediately closed in to stare intently at the bracelet. Naga _____2 whispered Nandi. The same bastard who attacked Sati in Meena, growled Shiva. The same Naga who attacked us on our return from Manda _ the very, bloody, same, son of a bitch _ he will pay for this, Shiva said. Veerbhadra _ tumming towards Parvati. Shiva said, we ride to Devapar tonight, we declare war. Parvati nodded. The Meluhan War Council sat quietly, observing 5 minutes of silence in honor of the martyrs of Manda _ General Parvati and his 25 brigadiers sat to the right of Emperor Daksha. To Daksha's left sat the Nilkanth, the administrative Brahmins led by Prime Minister Kanakala and the governors of the 15 provinces. The decision of the council is a given, said Daksha, beginning the PRCN meetings _ the question is, when do we attack? It will take us at the most a month to be ready to march, Your Highness, said Parvati. You know that there are no roads between Meluha, and our army would have to travel through dense, impenetrable forests. So even if we begin the march in a month, we will not be in Swadweep before 3 months from today. So time is of the essence. Then let the preparations begin. Your Highness, said Kanakala, adding a Brahmin voice of reason to the battle cry of the Kshatriyas. May I suggest an alternative? An alternative? Asked a surprised Daksha. Please don't misunderstand me, said Kanakala _ I understand the rage of the entire nation about what happened at Manda _ but we want vengeance against the perpetrators of the crime, not all of Swadweep _ could we try and see whether a scalpel might work before we bring out the mighty war sword? The path you suggest is one of cowardice, Kanakala said. Parvati. No, Parvati. My aim is to seek our vengeance at minimum cost to Meluhan lives, said Kanakala politely. After all, discretion is the better part of valor. My soldiers are resolute and will defend Meluha to the death, Madam Prime Minister. I know they will, said Kanakala, maintaining her composure. And I know that you too are willing to shed your blood for Meluha _ My suggestion is that we send an emissary to Emperor Dilipar and request him to surrender the terrorists who perpetrated this attack. We can threaten that if he doesn't cooperate, we will attack with all the might at our disposal. His eyes scowling with impatience, Parvati said, request him. And why would he listen? For decades, the Swadweepans have got away with their nefarious activities because they think we don't have the stomach for a fight, and if we talk about this scalpel approach after an outrage like Mount Manda, they will be convinced that they can mount any attack at will and we will not respond. I disagree, Parvati said. Kanakala _ they have mounted terrorist attacks because they are scared that they cannot take us on in a direct fight. They are afraid that they cannot withstand our superior technology and war machines. I am only thinking about what Lord Shiva had said when he had first come here. Can we try talking to them before we fight? This may be an opportunity to get them to admit that there are sections in their society who are terrorists. If they hand them over, we may even find of coexisting. I don't think Shiva thinks like that anymore, said Parvati, pointing towards the Nilkanth _ he too wants vengeance. Shiva sat silently, his face expressionless. Only his eyes glowered with the terrible anger seething within. "My lord," said Kanakala, looking towards Shiva, her hands folded in an amast. "See, I hope that at least you understand what I am trying to say. Even Brihaspati would have wanted us to avoid violence. If possible." The last sentence had an effect on Shiva similar to a torrential downpour on a raging fire. He turned Kanakala and gazed into her eyes, before turning towards Daksha. "Your Highness, what Kanakala says is right. Perhaps we can send an emissary to Swadweep to give them an opportunity to atone for their sins. Striving for a peaceful resolution will help in avoiding the deaths of innocents. However, IMD still suggest that we begin war preparations. We should be prepared for the possibility that the Chandravanshis may reject our offer." "The Mahadev has spoken," said Daksha. "I propose that this be the decision of the War Council. All in favor, raise your hands." Every hand in the room was raised. The die had been cast. There would be an attempt at peace. If that didn't work, the Meluhans would attack. "I have failed again," Bhadra cried Shiva. "I can't protect anyone in need." Shiva was sitting next to Veerbhadra, in a private section of his palace courtyard. A deeply worried Sati had invited Veerbhadra to try and pull Shiva out of his mourning. Shiva had retreated into a shell, not speaking, not crying. She hoped her husband's childhood friend would succeed where she had failed. "How can you blame yourself, Shiva?" asked Veerbhadra, handing over the chillum to his friend. "How can this be your fault?" Shiva picked up the chillum and took a deep drag. The marijuana coursed through his body, but did not help. The pain was too intense. Shiva snorted in disgust and threw the chillum away. As tears flooded his eyes, he looked up at the sky and swore, "I will avenge you, my brother. Even if it is the last thing I do. Even if I have to spend every moment of the rest of my life doing so. Even if I have to come back to this world again and again. I will avenge you." Veerbhadra turned towards Sati sitting in the distance, a worried look on his face. Sati got up and walked towards them. She came up to Shiva and held him tight, resting his tired head against her bosom, hoping to soothe Shiva's tortured soul. To Sati's surprise, Shiva did not raise his arms to wrap them around her. He just sat motionless. Breathing intermittently, "My lord," cried a surprised Vraka, as he stood to attention. Respectfully, so did the 24 other brigadiers, for the Nilkanth had just been announced into the war room. Parvateshwar rose slowly. He spoke kindly as he knew the pain Shiva still carried about Brihaspati III's grisly death. "How are you, Shiva?" "I am all right, thank you." We were discussing battle plans." "I know," said Shiva. "I was wondering if you could join in." "Of course," said Parvateshwar, as he moved his chair to the side. "The essential problem for us," said Parvateshwar, trying to quickly bring Shiva up to speed, "is the transport links between Meluha and Swadweep. There aren't any, right?" "Right," answered Patviteshwar. After their last defeat at our hands 100 years ago, the Chandravanshis destroyed the entire infrastructure that then existed between Meluha and Swadweep. They depopulated their border cities and moved them deeper into their empire. Forests grew where cities and roads once were. There is no river that flows from our territory into theirs. Basically, there is no way our huge, technologically superior war machines can be transported to the borders of Swadweep. "That was their intention, obviously," said Shiva. "Your superiority is technology. Their superiority is their numbers. They have negated your strength." "Exactly. And if our war machines are taken out of the equation, our 100,000 strong army may get inundated by their million soldiers." "They have a million strong army?" asked Shiva, incredulous. "Yes, my lord," said Vraka. "We can't are absolutely sure, but that is our estimate. However, we also estimate that the regulars in their army would not be more than 100,000. The rest would be part-timers. Essentially, people such as small traders, artisans, farmers and anyone without influence. They would be forcibly conscripted and used as cannon fodder. Disgusting, said Parvates, who risking the lives of Shudras and Vaishyas for a job that should be done by Kshatriyas. Their Kshatriyas have no honor. Shiva looked towards Parvates and nodded. Can't we dismantle our war machines, carry them to Swadweep and reassemble them? Yes we can, said, but that is technically possible only for a few. Our most devastating machines, which would give us the edge, like the long-range catapult, cannot be assembled outside a factory. The long-range catapult? Yes, answered Parvates, it can hurl huge boulders and smoldering barrels over distances of more than a kilometer. If used effectively they can soften, even devastate, the enemy lines before our cavalry and infantry begin their charge. Basically, the role that elephants used to play earlier. Then why not use elephants? They are unpredictable. No matter how effectively you train them, an army often loses control over them in the heat of the battle. In fact, in the previous war with the Swadweapons, it was their own elephants who brought about their downfall. Really? Asked Shiva. Yes, answered Parvates, our ploy of firing at the mahouts and generating tremendous noise with our war drums worked. The Chandravanshi elephants panicked and ran into their own army, shattering their lines, especially the ones composed of irregulars. All we had to do then was charge in and finish the IB_. No elephants then. Absolutely, said Parvates, so we need something that we can carry along with us and which can be used to soften their irregulars in order to negate their numerical superiority. Parvates nodded. Shiva looked towards the window, where a stiff morning breeze was making the leaves flutter. The leaves were green. Shiva stared harder. They remained green. I know, said Shiva, looking at Patviteshwar suddenly, his face luminescent. Why don't we use arrows? Arrows? Asked a surprised Parvates. Archery was the battle art of the most elite Kshatriyas, used for one-on-one duels. However, Smas one-on-one duels could only be fought between warriors of equal chosen tribes. This skill was reduced to being a demonstration art for the creme de la creme. Archers aimed huge respect for their rare skill, but they were not decisive in battles. There had been a time when bows and arrows were crucial in war strategies as weapons of mass destruction. That was the time of the Deji astras. Many of these astras were usually released through arrows. However, with the ban on Deji astras many thousands of years ago by Lord Rudra, the effectiveness of archery units in large-scale battles had reduced drastically. How can that reduce the numerical superiority, my lord? Asked Vraka. Even the most skilled among the archers will take at least 5 seconds to aim, fire and execute a kill. He will not be able to kill more than 12 a minute. We have only 100 Kshatriyas who are of the gold order of archers. The rest can shoot, but their aim cannot be relied upon. So we will not be able to kill more than 1,100 of our enemies per minute. Certainly not against the Chandravanshis. I am not talking about using arrows for one-on-one shooting, said Shiva. I am talking about using them for softening the enemy, as weapons of mass destruction. Disregarding the confused expressions of his audience, Shiva continued, let me explain. Suppose we create a corps of archers of the lower Kshatriya chosen tribes. But their aim wouldn't be good, said Vraka. That doesn't matter. Let us say we have at least 5,000 such archers. Suppose we train them to just get the range right. Forget about the aim. Suppose their job is to just keep firing arrows in the general direction of the Chandravanshi army. If they don't have to aim, they can fire a lot more quickly. Maybe one arrow every 2 or 3 seconds. Parvates narrowed his eyes as the brilliance of the idea struck him. The rest of his brigadiers were still trying to gather their thoughts. Think about it, said Shiva. \VE would have 5,000 arrows raining down on the Chandravanshis every 2 seconds. Suppose we can keep this up for 10 minutes. An almost continuous shower of arrows. Their irregulars would break. The arrows would have the same effect as that of the elephants in the last war. Brilliant, cried Vreka. Perhaps, mused Parvatiahor, our archers could be trained to release the arrows lying on their backs while holding up the bow with their feet. No doubt, accuracy would be somewhat compromised, but the effect would be far more deadly. Excellent, exclaimed Shiva. Because then the bows can be bigger, and the range longer, and the arrows bigger and thicker, almost like small spears, continued Parvatiahor, strong enough to even penetrate leather and thick wooden shields. Only the soldiers with metal shields, like the regulars, would be safe from this. Do we have our answer? Asked Shiva. Yes, we do, answered with a smile. He turned towards Vreka. Create this corps. I want 5,000 men ready within 2 weeks. It will be done, my lord, said Vreka. What do you want to talk about, Shiva? Asked Parvatiahor, as he entered the metallurgy factory. He was accompanied by Vaka and Prasenjit. Just as Shiva had requested, Vreka had reluctantly left the archery corps he had been training over the past week. However, he had been motivated to attend in expectation of another brilliant idea from the Nilkanth. He was not disappointed. I was thinking, said Shiva, we would still need an equivalent of your stabbing ram to break their center. The center is where I assume their general would place their regulars. As long as they hold, our victory cannot be guaranteed. Right, said, and we have to assume that these soldiers would be disciplined enough to stay in formation despite the barrage of arrows. Exactly, said Shiva. We can't transport the ram, right? No, we can't, my lord, said Vreka. How about if we try to create a human ram? Go ahead, said Parvatiahor slowly, listening intently. Say we align the soldiers into a square of 20 men by 20 men, said Shiva. We can have each one of them use his shield to cover the left half of his own body and the right half of the soldier to the left of him. That will allow them to push their spear through, from in between the shields, said Parvatiahor. Exactly, said Shiva. And the soldiers behind can use their shields as a lid to cover themselves as well as the soldier in front. This formation would be like a tortoise, with the shields holding against any attack. Much like a tortoise shell, the enemy will not be able to break through, but our spears will cut into them. We could have the strongest and most experienced soldiers in the front to make sure that the tortoise is well led, said Prasenjit. No, said Parvatiahor. Position the most experienced at the back and at the sides, to make sure that the square doesn't break in case the younger soldiers panic. This entire formation works only if the team stays together. Right, said Shiva, smiling at Parvatiahor's quick insight. And what if, instead of the usual spears, they carried this? Shiva raised a weapon that he had designed and the army metallurgy team had quickly assembled. Parvatiahor marveled at the simple brilliance of it. It had the body of a spear, but its head had been broadened. Onto the broadened head, 2 more spikes had been added, to the left and right of the main spear spike. Assaulting an enemy with this weapon would be like striking him with 3 spears at the same time. Absolutely brilliant, Shiva marveled. Parvatiahor. What do you call it? I call it a Trishul. Prasenjit, said Parvatiahor. You are in charge of creating this corps. I want at least 5 tortoise formations ED by the time we march. I will assign 2,000 men to you for this. It will be done, my lord, said Prasenjit with a military salute. Parvatiahor gazed at Shiva with respect. He knew that Shiva's ideas were brilliant, and the fact that he had come up with these tactics despite his profound personal grief was worthy of admiration. Maybe what the others say about Shiva could be true. Maybe he is the man who will finish Lord Ram's task. Parvatiahor hoped that Shiva would not prove him wrong.